Do you know there are many of United players that left the club last season? See where they play, how they play, if they play. This is football heritage.
Manchester United, the biggest club in England, and the most successful team in the Premier League era, with 13 league titles, 2 Champions Leagues, 4 FA Cups, 2 Club World Cups, and 3 League Cups between the years of 1992 and 2013. However, in 2013, after securing Manchester United's 20th league title, their greatest ever manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, decided to step down and retire after 26 years in the job, leaving behind the most gaping position in football history. Some of the frontrunners to replace him were the likes of Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, Jurgen Klopp, and Carlo Ancelotti, but Manchester United were unable to acquire any of them. So instead, Fergie pointed towards his compatriot David Moyes, a 3-time Premier League Manager of the Year winner in his 11 years at Everton, transforming them from relegation contenders into top 7 regulars.
And his next words were, "And you're the next Manchester United manager." So I didn't get a chance to say yes or no. I was told I was the next Manchester United manager.
He may not have been Manchester United's first choice, but after support from Ferguson, he was hailed as the chosen one.
Your job now is to stand by our new manager.
David Moyes' first game was against the FA Cup winners Wigan in the Community Shield at Wembley, where United's star man from last season, Robin van Persie, scored twice in a 2-0 win, making David Moyes a Manchester United champion in his first game. In the following week, United began their Premier League campaign away to Swansea, who were many people's dark horses going into this season, but Moyes got off to a perfect start, with a spectacular brace again by Robin van Persie, and a double for Danny Welbeck as well, as United came away with a 4-1 opening game victory. Everything seemed perfect for Manchester United in Moyes' opening 2 games, and despite being the reigning Premier League champions, they weren't actually expected to go on and win it again, with Manchester City and Chelsea standing out as the favourites going into the season. With an ageing squad and their legendary manager leaving, many predicted that Manchester United were going to slip to 3rd for the first time since 2005, and this fall-off was reflected in the next 2 games. First, an uninspiring 0-0 draw with Chelsea, followed by a 1-0 loss at the hands of their big rivals Liverpool at Anfield. Things weren't looking good off the pitch either, as they had failed to pick up any of their main transfer targets, such as Gareth Bale, Cesc Fabregas, or Thiago Alcantara, meaning that the only signing of the entire window was the panic buy of Marouane Fellaini from Everton on deadline day for £27.5 million. Fellaini left United with a respectable legacy, but his first season was absolutely disastrous, with him continuously being outed as a flop, compounded by the fact that these bozos could have bought him for £23 million earlier in the window, but they allowed his release clause to expire just for them to have to pay more on deadline day. Meanwhile, they had the Wayne Rooney saga, who was attempting to force a move to Chelsea, but in the end it never materialised. United got back on track with a 2-0 win over Crystal Palace, but next was Moyes' biggest test so far, the Manchester Derby. And in this game, Manchester United got absolutely blitzed. It took just 15 minutes for Aguero to volley home an opener before Torre tapped in at the back post just before half time. And then less than a minute into the second half, Aguero knocked in a second, with Samir Nasri converting a 4th for the hosts in the 50th minute. Rooney's late free kick proved to be nothing but a consolation, as Manchester United were well and truly embarrassed. It got worse for United the following week, as Rio Ferdinand got spun by Amalfitano, who sat down De Gea to put West Brom ahead at Old Trafford, before Berahino smacked in a winner to sink the Red Devils to 12th in their first home defeat to West Brom since 1978. Somehow this season, Ferdinand and Vidic both morphed into diabolical bozos. However, against Sunderland, 2 Adnan Januzaj goals in his full Premier League debut kick-started a run of 13 games without defeat in all competitions for Manchester United, including a 1-0 win over league leaders Arsenal at Old Trafford. Despite that, Manchester United continued to concede some of those genuinely catastrophic goals football has ever seen, including a last-minute equaliser away to Cardiff, and their unbeaten run came to an end as Brian Oviedo scored a late winner for David Moyes' former side Everton at Old Trafford, followed by a Kabay winner for Newcastle a few days later. Manchester United's disastrous season continued in the new year, as Adebayor and Eriksson both got on the scoresheet for Tottenham at Old Trafford in a 2-1 win, before a few days later United hosted Swansea in the FA Cup 3rd round, where a last-minute header by Wilfred Bonney won the Swans their first ever game at Old Trafford, meaning that United were out of the cup at the first time of asking, and the United fans had had enough of Moyes already.
I just want anybody but David Moyes in charge. Give it Giggsy to the end of the season.
However, despite their terrible form in the Premier League and FA Cup, Manchester United had somehow snuck their way into the League Cup semi-finals, where they faced Sunderland with the chance of making it to Wembley. But some calamitous defending in the first leg gave Sunderland a 2-1 advantage going away to Old Trafford. United needed to win by 2 goals to potentially save their season and give themselves a chance at silverware. And inside the first half, Johnny Evans converted from close range to get the Red Devils back into the tie. However, after 90 minutes they were unable to find a second goal, meaning that the game went to extra time. And then in the 119th minute, Phil Bardsley struck one from 20 yards out, and this bozo De Gea in goal let it go through him as Sunderland had seemingly won. All hope was lost for Manchester United. But they had one last chance as Januzaj found himself in behind and played it in for Javier Hernandez to come up clutch with a goal with the last kick of the game to send the game to penalties. However, what preceded was the most diabolical, nefarious, abominable penalty shootout mankind has ever seen. First, Sunderland blazed their opening penalty over the bar, just for Danny Welbeck to do the same. Stephen Fletcher then pulled out the tamest penalty of all time before Darren Fletcher finally tucked one home. Marcus Alonso got Sunderland on the score sheet, and then Januzaj saw it saved. Key made it 2-1 to Sunderland, as Phil Jones also skewed his spot kick. The pedo Adam Johnson had the chance to win the tie for Sunderland, but his penalty was saved as well, giving Raphael the opportunity to equalise, which he didn't take, and Sunderland went into the final, meaning Manchester United were out in a shambolic affair of association football. It was another embarrassment for David Moyes, whose side went on to concede a hat-trick to Samuel Eto'o in a 3-1 loss at Stamford Bridge, before a Charlie Adam brace saw United lose to Stoke for the first time in 30 years.
Hey everyone, it's Mr. Flying Pig HD here. What the f*** is going on with Man United? That's the first time Stoke City have beat us in 30 years, mate. Nice one, Moisey.
Meanwhile, in the January transfer window, they acquired the signing of Chelsea superstar Juan Mata, who'd been overlooked by manager Jose Mourinho. And next up, they had Fulham at Old Trafford, where David Moyes' side had 81, yes 81 crosses in a single game, yet still failed to win. To this very day, I've still never seen anything like this. 81 flipping crosses is ridiculous, just to concede a 94th minute equaliser to Darren Bent, leaving United 7th in the league, 15 points off the top. And now United had just one more avenue to save their season, the Champions League, where after topping their group they faced Olympiacos in the round of 16, an easy route to the quarterfinals. Except this wasn't the Manchester United of old, this was David Moyes' Manchester United, and they lost the first leg 2-0. But it wasn't over, as in the second leg Van Persie was shoved over in the box and converted his penalty to get United back into the tie. Then before half time, Rooney played it across the box for the Dutchman to grab his second and force his side level, before firing in a wonderful free kick to complete both his hat-trick and an incredible comeback, seeing Manchester United make it into the Champions League quarter-final. However, it wasn't all roses and sunflowers, as in the Premier League, Manchester United welcomed their big rivals Liverpool to Old Trafford, who were looking to take the league title from their enemies. It didn't help that Raphael decided to punch the ball in his own box, giving Gerrard the opportunity to put the visitors ahead from the spot, before Jones barged Allen down in the box, allowing Gerrard to bag a second penalty of the afternoon and make it 2-0 Liverpool. This bozo Vidic then decided to get in on the action, giving away yet another penalty and getting himself sent off. However, Gerrard wasn't able to complete his hat-trick, missing his third penalty, but Liverpool would eventually make it 3, as Suarez found himself in behind and slotted past De Gea. It was jubilation for Liverpool, but yet again embarrassment for Manchester United. And it didn't get any easier, as their next game at Old Trafford was Manchester City, where Raphael slipped, Nasri hit the post, and Dzeko converted to make it 1-0. In the second half, Dzeko volleyed home his second from a corner, before Yaya Toure touched down the ball on the edge of the box and hammered in a third for Manchester City. And yet another convincing loss for Manchester United. And it was also a result that set up potentially the worst possible title race United fans could ever dream of.
It's like having a choice of two blokes to nick your wife.
And it's safe to say the Manchester United fans weren't exactly best pleased with David Moyes.
Next Tuesday, April Fool's Day, he's the biggest fool in Manchester, and that is you, David Moyes. You are nothing, you are a fool, and you are a waste of time. Good night.
Ironically, Manchester United's next game was on April Fool's Day against Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarter-final, where Danny Welbeck found himself through 1-1 with Neuer and decided to flip and chip it. What a bozo! However, in the second half, United would take the lead, with Vidic heading home from a corner, but it took less than 10 minutes for Schweinsteiger to hammer home an equaliser as the game finished 1-1. Manchester United now had to go away to the Allianz and win to knock Bayern out, and in the second half they got their breakthrough, as Patrice Evra smashed in an absolute rocket on the volley to send the United fans into delirium, and put United ahead on aggregate. The script was well and truly flipped, and the football world could not believe their eyes. For about 30 seconds, as Mandzukic equalised almost immediately, and from then on United had no chance, as Müller put Bayern ahead 3-2 before Robin stuck in a third goal in the night, seeing United knocked out 4-2 on aggregate, and their season was effectively over. In their next game, Manchester United went 2-0 down at Everton and were unable to recover, and that was it. David Moyes was sacked with Manchester United in 7th, unable to qualify for the Champions League with 4 games to play, and ironically it was the very club he left to join United who plunged the final dagger into his corpse. The United board did end up giving it to Giggsy until the end of the season.
Give it Giggsy to the end of the season.
With them beating Norwich 4-0 in his first game, but losing out 1-0 to Sunderland in his second, before closing out the season with a 3-1 win over Hull and a 1-1 draw at Southampton. Manchester United finished the season in 7th on 64 points, by far their worst ever Premier League finish. Before this year, they had never finished below 3rd in the Premier League, and they failed to qualify for the Champions League for the first time since 1995. In fact, they didn't even make it into the Europa League. It was a truly tragic season, but now that Moyes was gone, it would surely never be allowed to happen ever again. In May 2014, Manchester United hired Champions League winning manager Louis van Gaal to take charge after the 2014 World Cup, a competition where he took Netherlands to third, spearheading his team with Manchester United star Robin van Persie. He hired Giggs as assistant manager, whilst the likes of Ferdinand, Vidic and Evra all left the club, replaced by Marcus Rojo, Daley Blind, Ander Herrera and Luke Shaw. It truly was a new era at Manchester United. And after the failed experiment of a Premier League veteran, the fans were looking to a European managerial icon to restore the glory days to Old Trafford following a short blip. Just like Moyes, Van Gaal kicked off his Premier League tenure at United against Swansea, this time at Old Trafford. However, unlike Moyes, LVG wasn't able to get off to a great start, as Ki Sung-young and Gylfi Sigurdsson both got on the score sheet at the Theatre of Dreams, either side of a Wayne Rooney overhead kick and a 2-1 win for the Swans, in what was also a pretty tragic day for Ashley Young. Yeah, let's not get too much into that. United were then held to draws away to both Sunderland and Burnley, leaving them 14th and winless after 3 games. It was a poor start to life in Manchester for Louis van Gaal, but it got a whole lot worse as they went away to MK Dons in the second round of the League Cup, where Johnny Evans gave the ball away for Will Grigg to finish into an empty net, before in the second half improvising to force in his second of the night. Benik Afobe found himself in behind shortly after to make it 3, and then absolutely embarrassed Evans again before stumbling through to smack in a 4th, making it MK Dons 4, Manchester United 0. One of the most catastrophic results in Manchester United history. In fact, this game was such a despicable disaster that 8 of the starting 11 were sold or loaned out after this game and never played for the club again. And after a genuinely abominable beginning to the season, Manchester United decided they were going to become the new Galacticos. Welbeck was sold, Hernandez was loaned out, and in came the man of the match in the latest Champions League final, Angel Di Maria, for a British transfer record, as well as one of Europe's most prolific strikers of the last 5 years, Radamel Falcao, to slot in alongside Manchester United's greatest player of the Premier League era, Wayne Rooney, 2-time Premier League Golden Boot winner, Robin van Persie, and 2-time Chelsea Player of the Season winner, Juan Mata. Manchester United well and truly had a squad now, and their next game was against QPR at home, where it took Di Maria just 24 minutes to get on the score sheet on his Old Trafford debut via a free kick from range, before Ander Herrera slammed in his first Manchester United goal and Wayne Rooney made it 3 before half time, with Di Maria then grabbing an assist for Juan Mata, who completed a 4-0 rout for United. It was looking like things were really starting to gel for the Red Devils under Van Gaal, as Van Persie got his first goal of the season finishing a Falcao cross at Leicester, before Di Maria scooped a delicious chip over Schmeichel. Manchester United could seemingly do no wrong. Azura brought one back, but in the second half Herrera flipped in to score again and make it 3-1 Man U. But then something unprecedented happened. A little known striker named Jamie Vardy making his first ever Premier League start was taken down by Raphael in the box, scored by Nugent, before touching it down for Cambiasso to hammer in and shockingly make it 3-3. And then with 10 minutes to play, Jamie Vardy found himself in behind and slotted home his first ever Premier League goal. For good measure, he found himself in behind once again, this time taken down by this bozo Tyler Blackett who got sent off. And Dujoro scored again to wrap up a famous 5-3 win for Leicester. Manchester United had well and truly been torn to shreds by a player nobody had ever heard of, after being 3-1 up against a newly promoted side. It was a result that proved you can have all the attacking talent you like, but if you can't defend, you're never going to get anywhere. It took some heroics by Di Maria again and David De Gea against Everton for Manchester United to pick up their 3rd win of the season, and then they required late equalisers by Blind at West Brom and Van Persie at home to Chelsea before a trip to the Etihad, where Mike Smalling got himself sent off in the first half.
The 3rd captain was Mr. Mike Smalling. Oh, Chris, sorry.
And then Aguero bagged once again against Manchester United in the second half. It was a result that left United 10th in the Premier League table with just 3 wins in the opening 10 games, and it was now looking like David Moyes wasn't the problem after all. However, Manchester United proceeded to go unbeaten in the next 10 games, winning 7 of them, including a smash and grab win at the Emirates, and an impressive 3-0 home win over their big rivals Liverpool, where Mata and Van Persie were most definitely not offside. And I couldn't begin to tell you what on earth the Liverpool goalkeeper was doing here. Their run came to an end at home to Southampton, where Tadic grabbed the only goal in a 1-0 victory, and Van Gaal decided the solution was to put Phil Jones on corners away to QPR. Soon after a 3-1 win against Leicester, Di Maria's house was targeted by burglars who he had to fight off himself, with this even causing his wife to say a time in England made her feel like life wasn't worth living anymore. After 9 goals and assists in his first 10 games as a Manchester United player, Di Maria had suffered from a couple injuries, and following this burglary incident, he was never able to recover his form at Old Trafford. He did however pick up an assist away to Swansea for Herrera, but Key would be a thorn in United's side yet again to equalise, before Jonjo Shelby's long-range effort deflected off Bafétimbi Gomez past De Gea, giving Swansea yet another win against Manchester United. In the meantime, Manchester United drew Arsenal at home in the FA Cup quarter-final, a side who had failed to beat them at Old Trafford since 2006. However, in this game it was their former player Danny Welbeck Welbeck, who came back to haunt them after a truly atrocious back pass by this bozo Antonio Valencia, meaning Manchester United's hopes of silverware were over for a second season run. Also in this game, Di Maria decided to grab hold of referee Michael Oliver just moments after being booked for diving, seeing himself sent off instantly for a second yellow. What a bozo! In the midst of this, a video leaked of United captain Wayne Rooney getting knocked out in his kitchen by Stoke City right back Phil Bardsley. So in short, Manchester United appeared to be in chaos and a big response was needed. And next up was top 4 rivals Tottenham at Old Trafford, where Fellaini went through to fire United into an early lead with his 6th goal of the season. Then the ball came to Carrick, who headed in a second for United against his former club. And then Wayne Rooney bulldozed his way through the Tottenham defence and slotted it past Lloris to make it 3 before pulling out this iconic celebration in reference to the video that went viral earlier that day. They followed this up with a trip to Anfield, or should I say Juanfield, as Juan Mata opened the scoring in the first half before scoring this acrobatic bicycle kick in the second. In what was perhaps a game more famous for Steven Gerrard getting himself sent off just 38 seconds after coming on at half time in his last ever game against Manchester United. Manchester City then came to Old Trafford, where David Silva set up Aguero inside 10 minutes. But it didn't take long for Ashley Young to hammer home a scrappy goal from close range to make it 1-1, who then whipped it in for Fellaini to head in at the back post and turn the game around. In the second half, Mata found himself in behind to make it 3-1, and then for good measure, Young whipped it in again for Smalling to grab a 4th. Aguero tucked in a consolation goal, but in the end it was a big 4-2 win for Manchester United against their City rivals, completing a run of 6 wins in a row to propel them up to 3rd, 4 points clear of Manchester City. However, United went on to lose their next 3 games in a row, first away at Chelsea, before holding 3 after some truly hopeless defending away at Everton, and then for the 2nd season in a row lost at home to West Brom. 5 points from their final 3 games saw them finish the season in 4th. Whilst they may not have had an elite season, they had managed to qualify again for the Champions League, and may well have been back on the right track after a disastrous season under David Moyes. And now it was down to Louis van Gaal to see if he could build on a respectable debut season. Now going into Van Gaal's 2nd season, Manchester United realised the Galacticos experiment hadn't paid off, deciding not to extend Falcao's loan, whilst letting go of Robin van Persie to Fenerbahce, and Di Maria after just 1 season at the club to PSG. In their place they strengthened across the pitch, bringing in the likes of wonder kid Memphis Depay, the iconic Bastian Schweinsteiger, Southampton's much sought after Morgan Schneiderlin, defender Matteo Darmian, and World Cup finalist goalkeeper Sergio Romero, as the expectation for this season was to kick on from last season and challenge for the title. And Manchester United got off to the perfect start, kicking off with a 1-0 win over Tottenham thanks to a Kyle Walker own goal, then winning 1-0 again away at Villa Park through an Adnan Januzaj goal, before completing a 7-1 aggregate victory over Club Brugge in the Champions League playoffs, with Memphis Depay grabbing his first 2 goals for the club. However, their great start to the season came to an end when they faced their arch nemesis Swansea at the Liberty Stadium, where goals from Andre Ayew and Bafétimbi Gomis saw Swansea come from 1-0 down to beat United for a 4th game in a row. After this game, Manchester United decided to make one more big signing, securing the signature of Anthony Martial for a teenage record fee from Monaco, an upcoming superstar who'd been compared to the great Thierry Henry. And next up for them was Liverpool at home.
Now the fans are shouting every week, Louis van Gaal's army! Louis van Gaal's army!
In the second half, Blind opened the scoring from the edge of the box, before Ander Herrera hammered in a penalty to make it 2. Christian Benteke scored a fantabulous bicycle kick to pull one back for the visitors, but then it was time for Anthony Martial to make his Manchester United debut.
Martial is isolated, Skirtle here. Oh yes! Welcome to Manchester United, Anthony Martial!
It was a debut wonder goal for Manchester United's new wonder kids, and one that would never be forgotten. Martial followed this up with 2 goals away at Southampton, including one where he absolutely bamboozled Van Dijk. It was the perfect start to his Manchester United career. Meanwhile, Manchester United were back in the Champions League group stage after finishing 4th in the Premier League last season and breezing past Club Brugge in the qualifiers. And they began away to PSV Eindhoven, where Luke Shaw picked up an infamous leg break that halted his Manchester United career. Memphis Depay did go on to open the scoring against his former club, tiptoeing his way through the defence before a tidy finish. But before half-time, PSV levelled the scores from a corner. And then in the second half, Narsing headed in a second for PSV to give United the worst possible start back in Europe's elite competition. However, they were able to redeem themselves in their second Champions League game with a 2-1 win over Wolfsburg, before back in the Premier League, a 3-0 win over Sunderland would fire them up to 1st for the first time since Moyes' first game in August 2013. And next was a trip to the Emirates to really stamp their authority on this Premier League title race. But in this game, Arsenal absolutely bukkakied these bozos. It took just 6 minutes for Ozil to get in behind and play it into Alexis, who flicked it past De Gea, and then less than a minute later, Walcott found some space and laid it back for Ozil to make it 2, before Alexis Sanchez skipped past Darmian and hammered a rocket into the top corner. And it was Arsenal 3, Manchester United 0 in under 20 minutes. Manchester United were shell-shocked, whilst Arsenal were in dreamland, and it was a result United were never able to truly recover from. They then faced Middlesbrough at home in the League Cup 4th round, where the game finished 0-0 and went to penalties. And once again, Manchester United produced a pathetic penalty shootout display as Rooney, Carrick and Young all failed to score, seeing Middlesbrough win 3-1 in the shootout. Despite a few poor results, United had the chance to fire themselves up to second with a win away at Watford, and they got off to the perfect start as Memphis volleyed in from close range. However, Rojo took down Agallo in the box, giving Deeney the chance to equalise, making it 1-1 in the 87th minute. But then in the dying seconds, Schweinsteiger's shot was deflected into his own net by Deeney, giving United a crucial 3 points on the road, putting them up to second just a point off the top. And next was league leaders Leicester City. Last season, a little-known Jamie Vardy had shocked them in an inspired 5-3 comeback. But this season, everyone knew who he was. And his first half goal meant that he broke Van Nistelrooy's record of scoring in 10 Premier League games in a row. Before half-time, Schweinsteiger levelled from a corner as the game ended as a draw. Meanwhile, in the Champions League, United needed a win in their final group game away at Wolfsburg to qualify for the knockouts. And once again, Martial got in behind and scored a big goal for United. But it took just 3 minutes for Naldo to equalise with a volley, and then Wolfsburg carved United open with some slick play to make it 2-1. United were in need of a goal to keep their Champions League hopes alive, and an 82nd minute own goal got them back into the game. But 2 minutes later, Naldo scored again to win the game for Wolfsburg and knock United out in the group stage. Back in the Premier League, they conceded from a corner to Junior Stanislas, and then Josh King made it 2-1 to Bournemouth after some atrocious defending. It got worse as Ashley Young was left on the floor, whilst Cameron Jerome put Norwich a goal up at Old Trafford, before he found Alex Tettey to make it 2 for Norwich with De Gea standing like a statue. Martial pulled one back, but it wasn't enough as United lost again. Depay then pulled off the most diabolical header of all time, as Johnson found Bojan, who finished past 2 United players who looked like they'd been shot to the ground. And then Arnautovic fired a rocket to put United 2 down in 25 minutes. United had now lost 4 games in a row and found themselves 6th in the league, and a 0-0 draw at home to Chelsea meant they went 8 games without a win and were 9 points off the top of the league. And next up was Swansea City, the team they had lost about 50 million games in a row against. However, this time a late flick by Wayne Rooney saw them pick up all 3 points in a 2-1 win. First half goals by Wayne Rooney and Jesse Lingard, who had broken into the United first team this season, saw United go 2-0 up at Newcastle, looking to make it 2 wins in a row. However, Wijnaldum and Mitrovic both got on the score sheet for Newcastle, making it 2-2. But it looked like a late Rooney dagger had won it for United, just for Paul Dummett to pull out an absolute thunderbolt from nowhere, causing United to drop points yet again. Rooney continued his good form to grab United all 3 points at Anfield, but the entire United defence left Austin unmarked, seeing them lose again at Old Trafford to Southampton. Lingard scored again, this time at Stamford Bridge to give United the lead, but the defence fell asleep once more, allowing Costa to grab a late equaliser, as United's inconsistency was killing their chance of achieving anything this season. Away at 19th place Sunderland, they allowed a Wabi Kazri free kick to go all the way through into the net, and then De Gea allowed Kone's header to go through him for a 2-1 Sunderland win. But that wasn't the worst of it, as in the Europa League round of 32, they went away to FC Midgetland. Depay gave them a first half lead, but Pioni's sister went through to bring the host back level. Then late on, Manchester United conceded a goal to a player who can barely even control the football. United were not just embarrassing themselves in the Premier League, but in Europe as well. So what was Van Gaal's solution? He asked his players to be more horny.
And a lot of times I use the word horny to my players. It's true, isn't it?
But also, with his team suffering an injury crisis and Martial getting injured in the warm-up, he called upon 18-year-old Marcus Rashford to make his first ever start. I probably shouldn't be talking about 18-year-olds and being horny in the same sentence, but we move. Obviously, United had to embarrass themselves by making Sisto look like Ronaldo again, but in the second half, Marcus Rashford had his moment, tapping in from 10 yards out for a debut goal, and then grabbing a second to put United ahead on aggregate at the back post. United won the game 5-1 and qualified for the Europa League round of 16, but it was a game United fans will never forget as the night Marcus Rashford announced himself to the world of football. 3 days later, they hosted title favourites Arsenal at Old Trafford, and again Marcus Rashford was in the starting 11. And now in his Premier League debut, he got his first Premier League goal, firing past Czech to make it 1-0 inside 30 minutes. And in less than 2 minutes later, Lingard crossed it in for Rashford to head in his second. A dream start to his Manchester United career. Welbeck and Ozil scored for the Gunners, when Ander Herrera strike sealed a 3-2 win for United to get them back into the race for the top 4. And this is also a game probably best remembered for Van Gaal doing his best Ashley Young impression. However, United's good form was short-lived, as Mata got himself sent off at the Hawthorns, as Salomon Rondon condemned United to their first away loss at West Brom for over 30 years. Meanwhile, in the Europa League, they faced their big rivals Liverpool, where an early foul by Memphis Depay gave Sturridge the chance to score from the penalty spot. And then in the second half, Firmino doubled Liverpool's advantage going into the second leg. Martial got United back into the game with a penalty at Old Trafford, but Coutinho restored Liverpool's 2-goal advantage, skinning Varela before dinking De Gea to knock United out of the Europa League. Marcus Rashford continued his rise to stardom, nutmegging Demichelis before securing a 1-0 win for United at the Etihad to keep United in the top 4 race. But it all came crumbling down again as they headed to White Hart Lane, where Tottenham grabbed 3 goals in 6 minutes to obliterate Manchester United, who produced some truly hopeless defending in this game. United had now been knocked out of Europe twice and were lagging behind in the top 4 race. Their season was looking like an absolute disaster, but they still had one last hope: the FA Cup. In the quarter-final they drew at home to West Ham, leading to a replay at the Boleyn ground. And once again it was Marcus Rashford who produced some excellent footwork and then a spectacular finish put United ahead. Fellaini diverted home a second for the visitors, and Tompkins' header ended up just being a consolation as Manchester United were heading to Wembley, where they faced Everton in the semi-final. In the first half, Martial skipped past the defence to set up Fellaini, who scored against his former club to make it 1-0. However, Everton were probing, and in the second half, Ross Barkley won a penalty, and up stepped Romelu Lukaku. But he couldn't get his effort past David De Gea, who produced a magnificent stop. Everton would eventually get their equaliser though, as Smalling diverted a cross past his goalkeeper with 15 minutes to play. And with the game heading to extra time, Martial picked up the ball in the touchline, played a 1-2 of Rashford before firing it into Ander Herrera, who managed to sneak it back through to Martial to win the game for Manchester United in the 93rd minute. After a year of turmoil, United had a chance to save their season with a trophy. But before the FA Cup final, they still had a shot at making top 4. With Man City losing at Southampton and drawing at home to Arsenal, Manchester United were only 2 points behind with a game in hand away at West Ham. If they could win this game, they would qualify for the Champions League with the FA Cup final yet to play. Diafra Sakho gave the hosts a lead in the first half, but 2 Anthony Martial goals spun the game on its head, putting United 2-1 in the ascendancy and on the verge of Champions League football. But then with 15 minutes to go, Dimitri Payet chipped it in for Antonio to head home a Hammers equaliser, before Winston Reid completed the comeback as West Ham won the final game at the Boleyn ground 3-2. Manchester United won their last game 3-1 at home to Bournemouth, but it wasn't enough as they finished 5th behind Manchester City on goal difference, meaning they'd miss out on Champions League football again. So their season hinged entirely upon one game, the FA Cup final, where they faced Crystal Palace, a side who had never won a major trophy, whilst Manchester United were looking for their first FA Cup trophy since 2004. But with 12 minutes to play, Manchester United's defence fell asleep, allowing Jason Punchin to get in behind and hammer home the opening goal for Crystal Palace, as Alan Pardew celebrated on the touchline like this. A cup upset was on the cards, unless United could get into gear quickly, and Wayne Rooney took matters into his own hands, weaving through the entire Palace team before playing it across to Fellaini, who chested it down for Mata to equalise, sending the game to extra time. However, in extra time, Chris Smalling held back Balassi and got himself a second yellow card, giving Palace a man advantage. They weren't able to make the most of it though, as Valencia fired it into the box and the ball bounced up perfectly for Jesse Lingard to smack home a famous winner, and Manchester United had salvaged their season with a trophy. Kinda. It was their first major trophy since Ferguson winning the Premier League in 2013, but it wasn't enough to save Van Gaal's job, who had grown increasingly unpopular with the Manchester United fans due to his boring football. His side had only managed 49 goals in the league that season, with only Stoke scoring less inside the top half, and failing to qualify for the Champions League meant the writing was pretty much on the wall, but at least he left a trophy to remember him by. Following the departure of Louis van Gaal, Manchester United appointed former Porto Champions League winner, Chelsea 3-time Premier League winner, Inter treble winner, and Real Madrid record breaker, the special one, Jose Mourinho. Manchester United were no longer playing around. They were desperate to get back to the top, and they backed their new manager with 4 massive signings. First, La Liga prospect Eric Bailly to bolster the defence. Then, Bundesliga player of the season, Henrik Mkhitaryan, who managed 32 assists for Dortmund the previous season. And then the acquisition of football icon and Ligue 1 player of the season, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, on a free transfer from PSG. And then to top it all off, they brought back their promised child, Paul Le Bill Pogba, for a record-breaking £89 million from Juventus.
I'm back.
After falling off the pace under David Moyes and Louis van Gaal, Manchester United were now making a big statement. They were not here to take part, they were here to take over. And this was set to be the most competitive Premier League season yet. Conte had taken over at Chelsea, City now had Pep Guardiola, Klopp was starting to build something big at Liverpool, Poch was in his prime at Tottenham, and Arsenal still had legendary manager Arsene Wenger in charge. The scene was set for an all-time Premier League season. Jose Mourinho began his Manchester United career in the Community Shield against Premier League winners Leicester City, where Jesse Lingard ran through the entire defence to score the first goal of the Mourinho era. However, a perfect pass by this Belgian bozo Fellaini through to Vardy allowed Leicester to equalise in the second half. But a late winner by Ibrahimovic in his debut meant United won the Community Shield. And just like Moyes, Mourinho was a Manchester United champion after his first game. He also had a perfect start to his Premier League career at the club, starting the season with 3 wins from 3, as Ibrahimovic grabbed 3 goals in his first 2 games, whilst the last minute winner by Rashford at Hull maintained their 100% records. But the perfect start didn't last, as United hosted Pep Guardiola's Manchester City in the highly anticipated first Manchester meeting between the 2 biggest managers in the world at the time. First, Daley Blind was left looking like a statue, allowing De Bruyne to open the scoring just 15 minutes in. And then De Gea was left stationary too, as Kelechi Iheanacho made it 2. With Zlatan Ibrahimovic's goal not enough, with United losing 2-1 at home. Jose then lost his first Europa League match with the club in a 1-0 defeat away to Feyenoord, before a simply disastrous trip to Watford, afterwards, where they were lucky to not go 1-0 down early on, before finding themselves 2-1 down going into stoppage time. And then some truly diabolical defending led to Watford winning a penalty, smashed home by Deeney for a 3-1 loss. It meant that United had lost 3 games in a row and needed a statement win to get back on track. And they got exactly that at home to the champions Leicester City, going 4-0 up inside the first half, with Paul Pogba grabbing his first goal for the club. After back-to-back draws with Stoke and Liverpool, United now face Chelsea away, with Jose Mourinho returning to Stamford Bridge. And to be honest, it couldn't have gone much worse than it did, with Pedro scoring less than a minute in after some terrible defending, and then some more disgraceful defending from a corner allowed Cahill to make it 2. Hazard made it 3 in the second half after some trickery, before Kante sent Smalling, and it was Chelsea 4, Manchester United 0. An embarrassing return for Jose. However, United were back on track after knocking their rival City out of the EFL Cup, and then won 3-1 at Swansea, with Pogba scoring a memorable screamer. They then dominated Arsenal, going 1-0 up through Mata again, but a late Giroud dagger meant they only managed a draw, and 2 more successive draws, so United fall 13 points short of Chelsea at the top of the table. But some good form with 6 wins in a row in the Premier League allowed them to climb within 3 points of the top 4, and they made it through the Europa League group with a win over Zorya Luhansk. January saw the departures of both Morgan Schneiderlin and Memphis Depay after less than 2 seasons at the club. 2 more failed signings by the United hierarchy. But the club did manage to make the EFL Cup final after a 3-2 aggregate semi-final win over Hull City, and this was also the month when Wayne Rooney became the club's all-time leading scorer with a last-minute equaliser at Stoke. Meanwhile, in the Europa League, a round of 32 Zlatan Ibrahimovic hat-trick won them the tie against St Etienne, before he also scored a late win against Blackburn in the FA Cup. And then was the EFL Cup final against Southampton, a chance for United to win domestic silverware in back-to-back seasons. Zlatan scored a beautiful free kick to open the scoring at Wembley, before Lingard scored again in the final for Manchester United to make it 2-0. However, 2 poachers finishes by Gabbiadini brought the scores back level at 2-2. But of course, it was Zlatan to have the final say, with an imperious header to win the cup for United late on, and Jose Mourinho's first real trophy with the club. In United's next game, a calamitous challenge by Phil Jones saw Josh King earn a point for Bournemouth at Old Trafford, in a game best remembered for Tyrone Mings stamping on Zlatan's head, who thought he had gotten away with it, just for Zlatan to elbow him in the head from a corner 30 seconds later, getting himself a 3-match ban after the game, despite neither player getting a red card. United then travelled to Chelsea in the FA Cup quarter-final, where Ander Herrera picked up 2 yellow cards and was sent off for fouls on Eden Hazard, with Chelsea making full use of their advantage, winning 1-0 through an N'Golo Kante strike from range. Tight wins over Rostov and Anderlecht, including an extra-time Marcus Rashford winner, saw United earn their way through to the Europa League semi-finals, and then they faced league leaders Chelsea at home in the Premier League, a game they had to win to keep themselves within touching distance of the top 4. And in this game, Jose Mourinho gave Ander Herrera the nastiest man marking job on Eden Hazard. But not only did he stop Hazard from getting a sniff, he also produced an inch-perfect pass for Rashford to open the scoring in the first half, before having in one himself in a crucial 2-0 win for United. Finally getting their own back on Chelsea, United followed this up with a 0-0 draw at the Etihad, and then went 1-0 up at home to Swansea. However, as Gylfi Sigurdsson lined up to take a late free kick, De Gea commanded Herrera to get off the line and leave the job to him, just for him to let Sigurdsson's free kick go straight past him, exactly where Herrera was standing. Despite the draw, it was amazingly Manchester United's 25th game unbeaten in the Premier League since losing 4-0 at Chelsea. They were still only 5th in the league because about half of those games were draws, but they had the chance to secure a finish above Arsenal with a win at the Emirates. But a free goal by Xhaka deflected off Herrera put Arsenal 1-0 up in this game, followed by a header by Danny Welbeck, haunting his former club again as the Gunners won 2-0 and United's unbeaten streak was over. Either side of this game, Rashford and Fellaini scored goals to carry United past Celta Vigo in the Europa League semi-final, as they escaped a late scare where the Spanish side nearly went through on away goals. Goals by Wanyama and Kane put Tottenham 2 up against United, with Wayne Rooney's consolation being both his last goal for the club and the final goal scored at White Hart Lane, as a loss for United meant their place in 6th was confirmed before the end of the season. They finished the season with a 2-0 win at Old Trafford over Crystal Palace, with Jose giving the youth a chance in the last game of the season. They had lost as many games as league winners Chelsea, but drawing 12 more than the champions saw them finish the season in 6th, meaning their Champions League hopes rested on the Europa League final, where they faced a young Ajax team in Stockholm. And in the first half, a Paul Pogba strike deflected off Davinson Sanchez past his random goalkeeper to put United a goal up in the final, before Mkhitaryan flicked it in from a corner in the second half as United won the Europa League final 2-0. And once again, Jose had done it in Europe, with the likes of Zlatan, Bailly, Shaw, Rojo and Young all injured on the sidelines. Mourinho claimed this as part of a treble alongside the Community Shield and the EFL Cup, and he had gotten United back into the Champions League. 6th place was below expectations in the Premier League, but all in all it was a relatively successful season for the club, leaving the fans with much to hope for Mourinho's second season, where he usually wins the league. The summer of 2017 saw the departure of Manchester United's greatest legend of the Premier League era, Wayne Rooney, and the expectation was heavy on Mourinho to build on last season. He was allowed to finish 6th last season due to a success in other competitions and qualifying for the Champions League, but now the task was to produce a real challenge for the title, for the first time since Ferguson's retirement. And to do so, he brought in Swedish defender Victor Lindelof from Benfica, Nemanja Matic, who had just won his 2nd Premier League title at Chelsea, and Belgian star striker Romelu Lukaku, linking up with his close friend Paul Pogba after 25 goals in the Premier League for Everton the previous season. Manchester United now had a squad genuinely capable of winning the Premier League title. They began their season in the Super Cup against Champions League winners Real Madrid, where goals from midfielders Casemiro and Isco saw United fall 2-0 behind. And things got worse as the new £75 million striker messed up this chance from close range. Lukaku would eventually get his goal, but it was just a consolation as Real Madrid won the Super Cup. However, now it was time for the Premier League, where United kicked off their season against West Ham. And this is where we're introduced to a little thing called 4-0 FC, where Manchester United wiped the floor with West Ham United, Swansea City, Everton and Crystal Palace all inside their opening 7 games. Also picking up wins against Leicester City and Southampton, dropping their only points in a 2-2 draw at Stoke City. In this run, Lukaku picked up 7 goals for himself, including one against his former side Everton. Mkhitaryan recorded 5 assists and grabbed a goal against Everton as well, whilst the likes of Pogba, Martial, Rashford and Fellaini racked up a few for themselves too. Despite their great start to the season, they were still only 2nd, behind Manchester City on goal difference. And they followed up this run with a draw at Anfield before a trip to Huddersfield, where this bozo Victor Lindelof got torn inside and out before Aaron Moy thumped the newly promoted side into the lead, before making the scandalous error to allow Laurent Departure to go round De Gea and make it 2-0. Rashford pulled one back for the visitors, but it was the first defeat in the league for United, and an embarrassing one at that, losing to Huddersfield for the first time in 65 years, allowing Tottenham to draw level on points with them. And who was up next? Tottenham. This game was a tight affair with not much to separate the two sides, but later on Lukaku won a flick on, which sent Anthony Martial through, who finished past Lloris to win United a crucial 3 points, and Mourinho made sure to let the press know his thoughts of their criticism towards his side. Meanwhile in the Champions League, United won their first 4 games in a row, securing their place in the Champions League knockouts in October after a 2-0 win over Benfica. And next up was a trip to the champions Chelsea, who had slipped to 4th, 4 points behind United 10 games into this season, where a wonderful header by Alvaro Morata won the champions all 3 points. However, United got back to winning ways, smashing 4 past both Newcastle and Watford, with Blackchester United in full flow. Lukaku was still bagging, Martial was clinical, Pogba was in the form of his life, Lingardinho was playing like Messi, and even Ashley Young was scoring bangers. And now they were going away to the Emirates to face an in-form Arsenal side. And this was where Jose Mourinho put on a complete masterclass. Early on, this bum-ass bozo Koscielny gave the ball straight to Antonio Valencia, who charged through and made it 1-0 United, before the CTE-riddled imbecile Mustafi went one step further, allowing United in again as Jesse Lingard fired past Czech. And then Millie rocked on the Emirates. Lacazette smashed Arsenal back into the game, but an array of incredible saves by David De Gea kept the Gunners at bay, producing a record equaling 14 saves in a single game.
David De Gea could save the fucking Titanic.
Before Pogba skipped past Koscielny and laid it across for Lingard to tap in a 3rd, and saw a famous smash and grab victory for United. And next was a must-win game for Manchester United, as Manchester City came to Old Trafford, where United had to win to cut the 8-point gap City had at the top of the table. However, a spectacular assist by Lukaku straight to David Silva meant City took the lead in this game. Just before half-time, Rashford found space and levelled for the hosts, but then in the second half, this absolute donkey bozo Lukaku got yet another assist for Man City, this time for Otamendi, who won the game for the visitors. And this was the game where the title was effectively over. 11 points behind in December, it was basically done already. And things got worse for United, as a last-minute winner for Bristol City saw United embarrassingly tumble out the Carabao Cup. Before away at Leicester, 2 Juan Mata goals weren't enough, as Jesse Lingard missed an open goal, before a 94th minute Maguire equaliser saw United drop points again. And that wouldn't be the last time Maguire scored against Manchester United. They also went on to draw 2-2 at home to Burnley, but 3 wins in a row got 2018 off to the perfect start. And it was now January, meaning the transfer window was open. And Jose Mourinho had his eyes on one of the most exciting attackers in the Premier League to add to his already star-studded attack. Alexis Sanchez looked set to join Manchester City and Pep Guardiola after trying to force a move away from free-falling Arsenal. But somehow, yes, for some unknown reason, Manchester United were able to convince him to join the second best team in the country rather than the one that was guaranteed to win the Premier League title. And on the fateful night of January 22nd, 2018, the world's most expensive piano player was unveiled. In his place, Manchester United sent Henrik Mkhitaryan Arsenal's way after Jose Mourinho texted him every single night to leave so he could get Alexis. And Manchester United now had 2 of the Premier League's top 3 goal scorers from last season in their attack. And so what happened in the next Premier League game? They conceded after 8 flipping seconds to Christian Eriksen, before Phil Jones fired the ball into his own net in a 2-0 loss to Tottenham. Alexis would get his first goal in his first start at Old Trafford, but only after missing a penalty first. But away at relegation threat to Newcastle, he fumbled an open goal chance, before Matt Ritchie sealed a 1-0 home win as United fell even further off the top. It looked like things were going to get worse as Willian put Chelsea 1-0 up at Old Trafford. However, Lukaku-inspired comeback grabbing a goal and an assist saw United turn the game on its head and win 2-1. In their next game, United saw themselves fall behind again, this time 2-0 away to Crystal Palace. But goals from Smalling, Lukaku and a banger from Nemanja Matic saw United produce yet another comeback victory. And no comeback was needed when they faced Liverpool at Old Trafford, as Rashford spun Trent to make it 1-0, before bagging a memorable brace to put United 2 to the goods. An own goal by Eric Bailly made for a nervy second half, but United held on for a big win against their rivals to solidify second place. They then faced Sevilla at home in the Champions League round of 16 after a 0-0 draw in the first leg in Seville. Later on, Wissam Ben Yedder picked up on the edge of the box and rifled home a dagger for the visitors, and a few minutes later headed in a second at the back post, which De Gea was unable to keep out to send United packing, as Lukaku's consolation goal wasn't enough, and United were embarrassingly knocked out in the round of 16 by the team that finished 7th in La Liga. And this was the result that sparked Jose Mourinho's famous football heritage run after vast criticism of him and his side.
Otamendi, Kevin De Bruyne, Fernandinho, Silva, Sterling, Aguero, they are investments from the past. Do you know where are many of United players that left the club last season? See where they play, how they play, if they play. This is football heritage.
And now they face the toughest fixture of the season, Manchester City at the Etihad. And this wasn't just any Manchester derby, this was Manchester City's opportunity to secure the league title against their local rivals with 6 games left to play. And the Manchester City party got off to a perfect start as Vincent Kompany's bullet header put the hosts into an early lead. Then before half time, Gundogan spun and tucked home a tidy finish. It was Manchester City 2, Manchester United 0, and it looked like City were bringing the Premier League title back to the blue side of Manchester. However, with the freedom of having no pressure on them, United came out flying in the second half, as Paul Pogba, with his controversial blue hair, pulled one back for United, before Alexis Sanchez chipped in for Pogba to head in a shock equaliser just 2 minutes later. From out of nowhere, United were back in the game, and then Alexis's free kick was met by Chris Smalling to complete the comeback, and Manchester United had officially spoiled City's title party, meaning City then had to wait for United to next drop points for them to officially win the title. But they didn't have to wait long, because in literally their very next game, Manchester United lost at home to 20th place West Bromwich Albion for just their 4th win of the season, and Manchester City were champions, so that comeback was genuinely for nothing. However, United did have one last chance at silverware. They had earned their way into the FA Cup semi-finals, where they now faced Tottenham, but just 10 minutes in, Dele Alli scored from close range and flossed on them. Obviously though, it was Tottenham, and we all know when it comes to winning trophies, there's no chance Tottenham can beat Man United. So Pogba bullied Dembele off the ball, chipped it into Alexis Sanchez, who equalised against his former rivals. And then in the second half, the ball fell perfectly for Ander Herrera to hammer in a winner, and Manchester United went to the FA Cup final for the second time in 3 years. After this, they hosted Arsene Wenger's Arsenal for the final time at Old Trafford, where Pogba opened the scoring, but Henrik Mkhitaryan came back to score against his former side to equalise. And just when it seemed like the game was going to end as a draw, Marouane Fellaini came up with an extra time winner for Manchester United and Fergie time for Mourinho. They still found time to lose one more game, this time 1-0 away to Brighton. But a 1-0 win against Watford on the final day sealed second place for them, 19 points behind first place Manchester City. But still to play was the FA Cup final against Jose Mourinho's former club Chelsea, and with a chance for United to salvage a trophy this season. Phil Jones decided to take down Hazard in the box, who calmly converted his penalty as United lost the final 1-0. In the end, it was a turbulent season for United. They finished second in the league with the highest points total since Ferguson in 2013, which Jose called one of the best achievements in his entire career. But the season ended trophyless, and ultimately, United didn't achieve their pre-season targets, meaning the pressure was on for Mourinho in his 3rd season at the club. United backed Mourinho in his 3rd season at the club by bringing in the signings of promising right-back Diogo Dalot, exciting midfielder Fred from Shakhtar, and 3rd choice goalkeeper Lee Grant. And whilst these may not have been the worst signings in the world, there wasn't really any quality brought in that could elevate Manchester United into real title challenges. And Jose Mourinho spent the entire transfer window on his knees begging for a top quality centre-back to be brought in, and the board were unable to deliver. So to put it lightly, Jose was vexed going into this season. And if there's one thing you don't need going into a new season, it's a pissed Jose Mourinho in charge. They didn't get off to the worst start though, as they hosted Leicester City at Old Trafford, winning an early penalty which the captain Pogba stood up to take, which he eventually scored after the longest run-up in history. and then later on Luke Shaw scored his first ever goal to seal the victory. Their second game didn't go quite to plan though, as he got torn to shreds by Brighton, who went 3-1 up in the first half, with some of the most atrocious defending I've ever set my eyes upon. And even Pogba had enough of his own run up by this point, as he bagged a consolation goal. But it got worse in their third game, as 2 goals in 2 minutes by Harry Kane and Lucas Moura saw United fall 2 goals behind at home to Tottenham, before Lucas Moura absolutely embarrassed Chris Smalling and slapped in a third. But apparently this 3-0 loss for United had a cryptic meaning none of us were aware of.
What was the result? 3-0. Do you know what this means? 3 premierships, and I won more premierships alone than the other 19 managers together. 3 for me and 2 for them.
Yeah, this guy had fully lost his mind.
Respect, man, respect.
Lukaku decided not to be a donkey in United's next game at Burnley, scoring 2, whilst Pogba decided to, yeah, whatever that was supposed to be. And Rashford got himself sent off for a headbutt. Even when these guys were winning, they still managed to embarrass themselves. Things may not have been going to plan in the Premier League, but in the Champions League, United went 1-0 up away to Young Boys through Paul Pogba, before winning another flipping penalty. Here we go again. At least he actually scored this time, and then Martial made it 3. A João Moutinho goal saw them draw at home to Wolves, before they faced Derby County in the Carabao Cup third round, where of course Juan Mata put them into an easy 1-0 lead. But out of nowhere, Harry Wilson scored this insane free kick to shock Old Trafford and make it 1-1, and then Marriott headed in from close range to put Derby in the lead with 5 minutes to play. It looked like Manchester United were going to embarrassingly crash out, but in the 95th minute, Fellaini crashed in an equaliser to save his side. And of course they would go on to win on penalties, right?
He's bloody missed it! What a prat! What a prat!
This bozo Phil Jones missed a deciding penalty, and Manchester United were out at home to Derby flipping County. This was a new low, man. And following this game, Paul Pogba was seen laughing alongside some of his teammates in the stands on Instagram, leading to Jose Mourinho stripping him of vice captaincy, with this infamous video at United's training ground going viral the very next day. It clearly worked, as they lost to West Ham in their very next game. And this has to be some of the worst marking I've ever seen. It was literally 2 minutes after pulling it back to 2-1. Are they even trying to defend at this point? Manchester United were now fully in flow state of ineptitude. Lukaku was performing like a disorientated donkey with the first touch of a trampoline, the Fred signing was looking about as inspiring as a cancer diagnosis, and Phil Jones was playing like, well, Phil Jones. It got so bad that rumours were spreading that if United were to lose their next game to 18th place Newcastle, who were without a win this season, Jose Mourinho would be sacked. But surely they weren't going to lose, right? Well, inside just 7 minutes, Kennedy scored his only goal of the season, and then 3 minutes later, striker Yoshinori Mutu also scored his only goal of the season to make it 2-0 to Newcastle. And honestly, I don't have the words to describe the ineptitude of this team. But then in the second half, Manchester United came alive. First, Mata scored from a free kick, 2-1. Then, Pogba flicked it back for Martial to hit home, 2-2. And then in the 90th minute, Ashley Young whipped in for Alexis Sanchez to save Mourinho's job with his 4th goal for the club. It was truly a heroic comeback against a team who had managed a mighty 2 points from 7 games so far this season, taking them up to 8th in the table. It came to no surprise that Chelsea went 1-0 up at Stamford Bridge against United, but it did come to surprise that Martial scored twice in the second half to put United into a 2-1 lead. And going into stoppage time, it looked like they'd pull off a shock win. However, in the dying seconds, Ross Barkley smashed home a leveller, and celebrations from the Chelsea bench sent Mourinho into a frenzy, causing a riot. It was heartbreak for United, who next up had Juventus at Old Trafford, and the return of Cristiano Ronaldo. But it was a goal by Paulo Dybala which put United's chance of making it out of their Champions League group in jeopardy. But back in the Premier League, United won back-to-back games against Everton and Bournemouth, before going away to Turin for the return leg against Juventus, where this time Ronaldo did score and celebrated after a beautiful volley. And just when it looked like United were going to lose again, Juan Mata pulled out a wonderful free kick with 4 minutes to play. Then in the last minute, Young whipped in a free kick which went all the way through, and United completed an incredible turnaround, with Mourinho making sure the Juventus fans knew who had beaten them. But they weren't able to do the same thing to Manchester City, who brushed them aside like the good boys they were in a comfortable 3-1 victory. Despite being whack in the Premier League, they did qualify through their Champions League group after a last-minute winner from Marouane Fellaini against Young Boys, sending Mourinho absolutely wild on the touchline. Against Arsenal, they conceded 2 of the most diabolical goals in Premier League history in a 2-2 draw. I genuinely don't even have the words to describe this flipping goal, man. But this game is probably best remembered for Fellaini pulling Guendouzi's hair and getting away with it. Meanwhile, Phil Jones pulled off the spectacular finish in a 2-1 loss in Valencia before United faced a trip to Anfield, where Mane chested down and volleyed home an opener for Liverpool. However, Alisson spotted a cross which Lingard capitalised on to level the scores before half-time, and United were able to maintain a 1-1 scoreline until Xherdan Shaqiri came on the pitch and had his effort deflected past De Gea, and then a few minutes later had another shot deflected in, making it 3-1 to Liverpool. And United weren't able to come back from that, and neither was Jose Mourinho, as he was sacked a couple days later, with United sat 6th in the Premier League table, 8 points off 5th place Arsenal, and 19 points off top spot Liverpool after their worst start to a season in 28 years. He was replaced by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as interim until the end of the season. Former Manchester United striker who scored the winning goal in the 1999 Champions League final en route to the treble, and with no expectations whatsoever, his job was simply to relieve the toxic atmosphere that developed under Mourinho. However, what came next was Manchester United's best form since Ferguson, winning their next 6 games in a row, playing some truly tantalising football, including a 5-1 win over Cardiff in Ole's first game, 4 against Bournemouth with this tremendous Rashford assist for Pogba, and a 1-0 away win to Tottenham, where De Gea once again produced a masterclass in goal. It was a run that saw United go from 6th all the way to 6th. But they did close the gap ahead of them from 8 points to 0 behind Arsenal, and were now just 3 points off a Champions League place. And next up was a trip to the Emirates in the FA Cup, where Lukaku picked up the ball and played through Alexis, who went round check to score against his former side. And then on the counter, Lukaku grabbed another assist, this time for Jesse Lingard, who once again scored and danced on Arsenal's head top. Aubameyang pulled one back for the Gunners, but a late Martial dagger saw United knock Arsenal out the FA Cup in the 4th round. The vibes were well and truly back at United, and not even Burnley going 2-0 up at Old Trafford with 10 minutes to go could spoil it, as even later goals from Paul Pogba and Victor Lindelof saw United salvage a 2-2 draw, before back-to-back wins away to both Leicester and Fulham meant United fired themselves into the top 4 for the first time this season. However, next was the Champions League round of 16, where United hosted French giants PSG at Old Trafford. It was a game that saw the return of Di Maria to Manchester as well, with his old teammate Ashley Young forcing him into the Old Trafford railings, and having a bottle thrown at him, which he used to mock the United fans. He also grabbed 2 assists in this game, first from a corner for Presnel Kimpembe to volley home, before laying it across for Mbappe to steer past De Gea and make it 2-0. To make matters worse for United, their star player Paul Pogba picked up a red card, meaning he had missed the second leg away from home, leaving a mountain to climb for United in Paris. But just as Ole said,
"Yeah, but mountains are there to be climbed, aren't they?"
United recovered themselves in the FA Cup away to Chelsea, where headers by Ander Herrera and Paul Pogba saw them win 2-0 against the Blues. And following a solid 0-0 draw at home to Liverpool, United won 3-1 at Selhurst Park, before playing out a thriller against Southampton, with bangers by Jan Valery and Andreas Pereira making it 1-1 after 53 minutes. And Lukaku cutting inside to put United into a 2-1 lead, just for Ward-Prowse to score a stunning free kick to seemingly salvage a point for Southampton. But in the dying moments, Lukaku smacks home a late winner to fire United back into the top 4. Oh, and we just about had time for one more Paul Pogba penalty. And then came that fateful night, the Champions League round of 16 second leg away in Paris. After going 2 goals down at home in the first leg, United had to pull off mission impossible without their talisman Paul Pogba. However, it took less than 2 minutes for Kehrer to play it directly to Lukaku, who went round Buffon and slotted home the opening goal for Manchester United. So PSG nerves were on show for everyone to see, and United had hope. They were now well and truly back into this tie, 2-1 on aggregate. But then less than 10 minutes later, Mbappe played it across the box for Bernat to tap in a goal for PSG, and all that hope had been wiped away. PSG were now back in control of this tie, and it seemed like they were going to wipe the floor with Manchester United. Then from out of nowhere, Rashford shot from 40 yards, inexplicably spilled by Buffon into the path of Lukaku, and United had a second. It was now 3-2 on aggregate and level on away goals, meaning that one more goal for United would see them complete an improbable comeback. But in the 89th minute, it was still 2-1 on the night, and it seemed like United's chance was faded, as Diogo Dalot took a seemingly pointless shot from 25 yards out, leading to a corner. However, before United had the chance to take their corner, the referee was sent over to the VAR screen to check for a penalty.
Penalty! It's a penalty to Manchester United!
The ball had struck Kimpembe's arm, and from out of nowhere, Manchester United were awarded a stoppage time penalty. With 93 minutes on the clock, Marcus Rashford stepped up with a chance to take Manchester United into the Champions League quarter-finals.
What's going through the mind of Marcus Rashford?
Yeah, but mountains are there to be climbed, aren't they?
It comes down to Marcus Rashford against Gianluigi Buffon. Oh, he smashed it in!
And Marcus Rashford scored the goal to complete one of Manchester United's greatest Champions League comebacks. From 2-0 down in the first leg at home, Manchester United went away to Paris and sent PSG packing with a last gasp penalty, and Manchester United were well and truly back.
Man United might not thank me, but get the contract out, put it on the table, let him sign it, let him write whatever numbers he wants to put on there, give him what he's done now since he's come in, and let him sign the contract and go. Ollie's at the wheel, man, he's doing it, he's doing his thing. Man United are back.
That should have been the closing.
And those now are some of the most famous last words football has ever heard. In United's next game, they went away to the Emirates, where De Gea was left stranded after Xhaka's efforts swerved round him, and then a second half Aubameyang penalty saw Oli lose his first game in the Premier League. Goals from Raul Jimenez and Diego Jota for Wolves saw them then lose their next game 2-1 in the FA Cup quarter-final, and then a red card for Ashley Young, followed by maybe the most diabolical own goal in the history of the sport, saw them lose 2-1 again to Wolves, this time in the Premier League. I mean, what is even going on here, man? They needed 2 penalties to sneak a 2-1 win over West Ham, and by now Pogba had binned off that tragic run-up, and it looked like the wheels were falling off as they went into their Champions League quarter-final tie against Barcelona, where a Luke Shaw own goal saw them lose the first leg at home 1-0, and this time there was no miraculous second leg comeback, as Messi nutmegged Fred and cold one past De Gea, before this bozo De Gea let his P-roller somehow squirm underneath his arms. And for good measure, Coutinho's got an absolute screamer, making it Barcelona 4, Manchester United 0 on aggregate. And for the second season running, Manchester United's hopes of a trophy were over, out of every competition, and 21 points off the top in the Premier League. So after a great start and charge for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, United decided to just completely give up. They conceded not 1 goal, not 2 goals, not 3 goals, but 4 goals away to flipping Everton in a 4-0 loss, before being shown levels by Manchester City in a 2-0 Derby Day loss at Old Trafford. Another error by David De Gea saw Marcos Alonso equalise at Old Trafford in a 1-1 draw for Chelsea, and United now needed a miracle to qualify for the Champions League. They didn't get that miracle. Instead, they drew 1-1 away to bottom place Huddersfield, and then on the final day of the season, they lost 2-0 at home to already relegated Cardiff flippin' City. And ironically, after an incredible start as Manchester United manager with a 5-1 win over Cardiff that kick-started a memorable run of form, Ole's first season in charge of the club ended with a 2-0 home loss to Cardiff, following a truly dreadful end to the season. United finished the year in the same place Ole entered the job in, 6th in the Premier League and 5 points off a Champions League place. However, Ole was given a 3-year contract as Manchester United manager in March, following the famous 3-1 win over PSG, meaning he'd remain in charge heading into the next season. In Ole's first full season in charge, he attempted to undergo a cultural reset at the club, with the likes of Lukaku, Herrera, Antonio Valencia, Smalling and Alexis Sanchez all leaving, with Alexis even saying he actually wanted to leave the club after his very first training session back in January 2018, and Fellaini had also left midway through the previous season. Meanwhile, the club finally brought in Harry Maguire for £80 million, a record-breaking transfer that made him the most expensive defender in the world, as well as bringing in young prospects Dan James and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, whilst Anthony Martial finally got his number 9 shirt back. However, with Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea and Arsenal all making European finals last season, and Manchester City picking up all 4 domestic trophies, there was little expectation for Manchester United to get back into the Champions League places from outside the club. But from inside the club, it was seen as a necessity to make it back into the top 4. And first up was a visit from Chelsea, under new manager and club legend Frank Lampard, who had followed United's legend manager blueprint. And it took less than 20 minutes for Marcus Rashford to win and score a penalty, making it 1-0, before 2 goals in the space of 2 minutes by both Martial and Rashford put United into a commanding 3-0 lead. And then a late goal by Dan James on his debut made it 4, with Harry Maguire winning man of the match also on his debut. It was the perfect start to the new season for Man United. However, in their second game, they only managed to draw at Wolves, thanks to this Neves banger, with this bozo Pogba taking a crucial penalty instead of Rashford and missing, causing great controversy. And then they followed this up going 1-0 down at home to Crystal Palace through Jordan Ayew. They won a penalty to equalise, with Rashford stepping up to take it this time, but he then missed as well, as they needed a Dan James 89th minute banger to equalise, who proceeded to celebrate like this, just for Patrick Van Aanholt to score a 93rd minute winner straight through De Gea. Dan James scored again, this time away to Southampton, but a Vestergaard equalised meant once more that they failed to get the 3 points, as United fans didn't know how to contain themselves, watching one of their defenders actually make a successful tackle for once.
I think that right back's something different. I think Aaron is brilliant. He wins.
You look emotional, mate. I'm with you, go on, let it out.
He wins that ball so much.
Meanwhile, in the Europa League, young prospect Mason Greenwood got his first goal for the club in a 1-0 win over Astana, but they continued to struggle in the Premier League, as goals by Yarmolenko and Cresswell condemned them to a 2-0 loss to West Ham, seeing them slip to 8th in the league table. Greenwood scored again, this time against Rochdale in the Carabao Cup, but they then conceded to a literal schoolchild, sending the game to penalties, getting PTSD of the Derby game from last season. But this time, United actually won, 5-3 in the shootout. McTominay scored a screamer at home to Arsenal, but an Aubameyang Aubameyang equalised meant it was another game they had failed to win. Then away at Newcastle, Jetro Williams sent 2 United bozos before setting up Matty Longstaff to score the winner in his first ever Premier League game, and just Newcastle's second win of the season, as United fell to 12th in October. They were now 15 points behind first place Liverpool, who they played next and were looking unstoppable so far with a 100% record. However, in this game, Rashford sat down Van Dijk before Dan James set up Rashford at the back post to open the scoring and shock the lead leaders. But with 5 minutes to go, Lallana tapped in at the back post to equalise. It was the first game Liverpool had failed to win all season, but the draw meant United were now 14th in the league. The pressure was mounting on Oli, and big questions were being asked about his job. It had never been this bad before, and it was United's worst ever start to a Premier League season. They went on to miss 2 more penalties in a single game against Norwich City, but Rashford and Martial made up for their misses, both scoring in a 3-1 win. And United seemed to be back on track as they won 2-1 at Stamford Bridge in the Carabao Cup, including a mesmerising Marcus Rashford 40-yard knuckleball free kick to take United into the next round. Just for Wan-Bissaka to get spun by Josh King as United lost yet again, this time to Bournemouth. Then Phil Jones was bullied by Mousse, who set up Lundstrom, and John Fleck scored on the rebound, before Lys Mousse made it 2-0 Sheffield United in the second half. However, a stunning 7-minute comeback with goals from Brandon Williams, Mason Greenwood and Marcus Rashford saw United go 3-2 up in a result that could turn around their season. Except this was Manchester United, and they decided to let Oli McBurney equalise in the final minute as they dropped points again. And then a 2-2 draw at home to a Jack Grealish-inspired Aston Villa meant they were now down to 9th in the Premier League in December. And they lost to flipping Astana in the Europa League, where Tahith Chong missed an open goal from about 5 yards out. Meanwhile, Jesse Lingard is producing one of the most diabolical seasons in football history. This absurd walking catastrophe was playing as if all his limbs were discombobulated. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's job was well and truly on the line, and next up was back-to-back games against Tottenham and Man City. This could well be the end for the United manager. First was the return of Jose Mourinho, this time in his 3rd game as Tottenham manager, with Rashford firing it through Lloris at the near post to make it 1-0 early on. In the second half, Dele Alli beautifully touched down in the box and equalised, but a second half Rashford penalty saw United pick up a crucial win to relieve some pressure on Oli. And next up was Manchester City at the Etihad, the back-to-back league winners. And United turned up in this game. First, Rashford won a first half penalty which he coolly converted. Then, Martial took a touch in the box and finished at the near post to put United into a shock 2-goal lead. Otamendi pulled one back in the second half, but it wasn't enough, as United completed an incredible week, beating Tottenham and Man City in the space of 4 days, and were now up to 5th in the table. So how did they follow that up? Well, first, Victor Lindelof decided to score an own goal against Everton, meaning they needed a late goal from young Mason Greenwood to salvage a point, before De Gea somehow completely missed the easiest catch he could ever hope for, giving bottom place Watford the lead against them. And then Wan-Bissaka took down Sarr in the box, allowing Deeney to hammer in a penalty in a 2-0 win. However, big wins over Newcastle and Burnley to close out the decade saw them climb back up to 5th, 4 points outside the top 4 going into 2020. And next up was a trip to the Emirates, where Arsenal were looking for their first win under new manager Mikel Arteta. It didn't take long for this game to turn into a calamity for Man United, as Pepe grabbed an early goal from close range, and he absolutely tore Luke Shaw ragged in this game before Sokratis hammered home from close range from a corner to make it 2-0. And it was a game that could best be summed up for Man United by this disastrous Fred free kick sent straight into orbit. United would go on to lose 2 of their next 3 Premier League games, first losing to a dominant Liverpool side who fired themselves 16 points clear at the top of the league, with Salah absolutely manhandling Dan James to seal a 2-0 win, and then they faced Burnley at home.
Burnley are a team I'd love to see get relegated. I'm sorry if there are any Burnley fans, don't worry, there's not many. Oh shit! They've bloody scored!
Yeah, these bozos somehow managed to lose 2-0 at home to flipping Burnley. And they also found themselves knocked out the Carabao Cup semi-finals by Manchester City, with Phil Jones deciding to just give up on defending, and Andreas Pereira producing a poacher's finish for Man City. Manchester United were in desperate need of something to change. Somehow they were still 5th in the Premier League, but they were 6 points off top 4, and it felt like Oli could be sacked any day now. They desperately needed a big January signing to turn their fortunes around. So they decided to sign Odion Igalo on loan from China. Oh, and they bought some random Portuguese midfielder from Sporting as well. At Stamford Bridge, Maguire somehow managed to avoid a red card for blatantly kicking Batshuayi in the balls before Wan-Bissaka spun Willian and whipped it in for Martial to head in an opening goal for United. And then Bruno made an instant impact, with his corner met by the head of Harry Maguire, who had escaped a red card and now won the game for Manchester United. Bruno then scored his first goal for the club in a 3-0 win over Watford, before smacking one in from range in a 1-1 draw at Everton, after De Gea had decided to kick it directly at Calvert-Lewin in the 3rd minute. It was a game where United had gotten away with one, as Maguire scored a clinical own goal, but unfortunately his celebrations were cut short as Sigurdsson was judged to have been offside and interfering with play. And meanwhile in the FA Cup, Igalo was in on the goals.
In that position I just have to smash.
Next was the Manchester derby at Old Trafford. where Bruno pulled off some clever improvisation to get Martial in behind, whose shot snuck past Ederson and put United into a first half lead. And then in the dying seconds, Ederson decided to throw it directly to Scott McTominay, who finished from 40 yards as United completed the double over their City rivals. It would turn out to be the final game of the Premier League season before the country went into lockdown, following the COVID-19 crisis. Football didn't return until June, with United playing their first game back at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against former manager Jose Mourinho, where Harry Maguire showed the mobility of a tractor before De Gea let the ball go straight through him and into the net.
And De Gea, I wouldn't even let him on the bus after the match.
But a late penalty won by Paul Pogba was smacked in by Bruno Fernandes, rescuing United a point. And inspired by Bruno Fernandes, lockdown Manchester United would look like an entirely different team. NHS Martial was on fire, grabbing United's first Premier League hat-trick since Robin van Persie in 2013 and scoring 6 goals in 9 to close off the season. Mason Greenwood was unstoppable, capable of scoring bangers on both his left foot and his right foot, whilst Marcus Rashford was having the best season of his career so far. It did help that United were given penalties when their own players stamped on the opposition, but no one could deny that United were actually in good form. In fact, their attack was so good that even this diabolical defending by Maguire against Bournemouth and this genuinely scandalous handball by Eric Bailly didn't end up costing them. However, Obafemi's 96th minute equaliser at Old Trafford for Southampton and this handball by Paul Pogba leading to a penalty scored by Mikel Antonio saw United drop 4 crucial points in the top 4 race. Meanwhile, a 118th minute winner by Maguire away to Norwich saw United head to Wembley to face Chelsea in the FA Cup semi-final, a game where David De Gea allowed a Giroud flick to scrum past him before absolutely capitulating on this Mason Mount shot from range. A truly dreadful display capped off by a Harry Maguire own goal saw United knocked out in another semi-final, ending their FA Cup dreams. Meaning it all came down to the final day in the Premier League. Manchester United had fired themselves up to 3rd in the table, but they faced Leicester City at the King Power in their last game. If Leicester could win, United would drop to 5th, and instead Leicester would find themselves in the Champions League next season. However, with 20 minutes to play, Johnny Evans decided to take down Martial in the box, and Bruno scored yet another penalty. And then miraculously, Jesse Lingard scored this absolute screamer to get his first goal in the league that season, and Manchester United had qualified for the Champions League. In January, it had looked impossible, but after the signing of Bruno Fernandes, United had gone a run of 9 wins, 5 draws and 0 losses to finish the season in 3rd, closing a 14-point gap on Leicester City to make it back into Europe's biggest competition. And elsewhere, the Europa League was still ongoing. In August 2020, a Bruno Fernandes penalty took United past Copenhagen into the semi-finals, where they faced Europa League specialist Sevilla, looking for revenge after the 2018 Champions League round of 16. Yet again, they got another penalty scored by Bruno, but some generational defending by Harry Maguire to completely avoid the ball allowed a tap in for Suso at the back post. And then later on, De Jong scored from close range to break Manchester United hearts and send Sevilla into the Europa League final. For the 3rd season in a row, Manchester United ended the year trophyless, having been knocked out of 3 semi-finals. However, they had managed to recover their season in the Premier League, qualifying again for the Champions League, and their end of season form led to some excitement going to Ole's 3rd season. After turning their season around last season, there was newfound optimism at Manchester United going into the 2020-21 season. The season was played in empty stadiums because of lockdown restrictions, and due to the COVID break, United only had time for 1 pre-season game going into the new Premier League season. And off the pitch, their only signing before the season was Donny van der Beek, a promising young midfielder from Ajax. They opened the season at Old Trafford against Crystal Palace, where goals from Andros Townsend and Wilfried Zaha put the visitors 2 goals up. Van der Beek scored in his debut to get United back into the game, but later on Zaha scored again to grab Palace a shock win. In their second game, they went away to Brighton, where Mopé scored a Panenka pass to Gea and then pulled out this celebration. Maguire and Rashford both got on the score sheet to turn the game around, but Solly March scored a 95th minute equaliser from close range to salvage a point for Brighton, or so they thought as the referee blew the full-time whistle, but then gave a penalty for a Mopé handball after the final whistle, allowing Bruno Fernandes to score a 100th minute penalty, and controversially United won their first game of the season. And then against Tottenham, it took them just 24 seconds to win a penalty, which Bruno obviously scored to make it 1-0. However, 2 minutes later, United failed to clear the ball about 5 times in the space of 10 seconds before this bozo Maguire decided to hold back his own flipping teammate, allowing Tanguy Ndombele the opportunity to equalise. And then 2 minutes after that, the United defence fell asleep as Son got in behind and made it 2-1 to Tottenham, before Martial decided to slap Lamela and get himself sent off. It got worse for this disastrous bunch of Olodos as Bailly passed it straight to Kane, who went on to make it 3 for Tottenham, and then Son scored a 4th before half time. In the second half, Aurier got in behind Pogba and hit home a 5th, with Pogba then taking down Davies in the box, and Kane converted the penalty to get his 2nd, and Tottenham 6th in an embarrassing 6-1 defeat at home to former manager Jose Mourinho. On deadline day, United realised they had to do some business and brought in both left-back Alex Telles and clinical striker Edison Cavani to bolster the squad. And their form seemed to turn around, as they hammered Newcastle 4-1 away from home, before Rashford got another win away to PSG in United's opening Champions League game of the season, who then got his first ever career hat-trick at Old Trafford against RB Leipzig in a 5-0 win. It seemed like United had recovered from that horrific 6-1 loss to Tottenham as they hosted Arsenal at home in the Premier League. Just for Pogba to give away yet another penalty, which Aubameyang scored and then danced on United's head top in a 1-0 Arsenal win, leaving United down in 15th. They then decided to just give up on defending entirely, as they gave Demba Ba the entire length of the pitch to open the scoring for Basak Sahir, in a game United lost 2-1 in the Champions League. A 3-1 United comeback away to Everton eased the pressure on Oli, whilst they needed a Bruno penalty to sneak past West Brom. Bednarek and James Ward-Prowse put Southampton 2-0 up against Manchester United, but Cavani came on at half-time to inspire a second-half comeback with an assist and 2 goals, including a 92nd minute winner. And then United pulled off another comeback, this time for 1-0 down away to West Ham, with the Paul Pogba banger the catalyst for a 3-1 win at the London Stadium. However, things didn't go to plan in the Champions League, as they faced PSG at home with a chance to secure their place in the knockouts. Neymar put the visitors a goal up early on, but Rashford scored again against PSG to equalise. Martial then produced this heinous miss from close range, before Marquinhos put the Parisians 2-1 up in the second half. Fred then got himself sent off, making the task even more difficult, and then Neymar walked in a late goal to make it 3-1 with Maguire on the floor. But United were still top of their Champions League group going into the final game away to Leipzig, where it took Angelino just 2 minutes to put the hosts 1-0 up, and were then 2-0 up inside 12 minutes, with United conceding once again at the back post. Maguire then completely missed the ball again in Europe, as Kluivert made it 3-0 to Leipzig, with 2 consolation goals not enough, as United were knocked out in third after starting the day top of their group. Back in the Premier League, they were playing some scintillating football though. Away at Sheffield United, they scored this beautiful team goal, and then hit Leeds for 6 at Old Trafford in a crazy game, before Rashford scored a last gasp winner at home to Wolves. And De Bruyne penalty against Villa saw United win 8 from 10 in the Premier League, rising to second in the table, level on points with Liverpool at the top. They also brought in young star Amad Diallo from Atalanta, tipped to become a top player. For the second season running, they lost to Manchester City in the Carabao Cup semi-finals, this time losing 2-0 at Old Trafford. However, stunning goals by Pogba away to both Burnley and Fulham saw United go top of the table in January, 6 clear of rivals Liverpool, who they beat 3-2 in the FA Cup after a thrilling Bruno Fernandes free kick. And for the first time in 7 years, Manchester United looked like genuine title contenders. They were unbeaten in 13 league games and looked to have overcome their defensive issues from the start of the season. This was a team genuinely capable of winning the Premier League title, or so they thought, as in their very next game they faced bottom place Sheffield United at Old Trafford, who had managed just 5 points all season and went 1-0 down in the first half. It seemed as though a Maguire equaliser got them back on track, just for Oliver Burke to win the game for Sheffield United, in a catastrophically embarrassing defeat for Man U. And honestly, this team was just bipolar, as they beat Southampton by a record equalling 9 goals in their next game at Old Trafford, before going 2-0 up at home to Everton, being pegged back to 2-2, and then scoring a late goal to go 3-2 up, before De Gea made himself about as intimidating as Calvert-Lewin in a dress to allow Calvert-Lewin to make it 3-3 in the last minute, as a run of draws saw City open up a 12-point gap on their rivals, with their next game being Manchester City at the Etihad, a must-win if United wanted to force any sort of title race. And early on, Anthony Martial won a penalty, which Bruno Fernandes converted to put United a goal up. And then in the second half, Luke Shaw ran the length of the pitch, picked the ball up again in the box, and made it 2-0 in the bottom corner, sealing a big 2-0 win for United in the derby. Meanwhile, in Europe, they won a great run, slapping Sociedad 4-0 in the round of 32, before Ahmad got his first United goal in a 1-1 draw against Milan, as Pogba grabbed the winner in Milan to send United to the quarter-finals, where they handled Granada with ease. However, they didn't fare the same form in the FA Cup, as Fred played it straight to Iheanacho, who rounded De Gea to put Leicester in the lead, and then headed in at the back post as Leicester won 3-1 in the quarter-final. United then headed away to Tottenham, where an atrocious dive by Son saw Cavani's opener ruled out, before it was Son himself who gave Tottenham the lead before half-time. But in the second half, United fought back to batter Tottenham and win 3-1, avenging that 6-1 from earlier in the season, a win that was part of a 5-game winning run that saw United get within 8 points of Man City at the top. However, in April, controversy sprung, as United's participation in the vastly unpopular European Super League was announced. It was met by protests from the fans, including one that saw the match against Liverpool at Old Trafford postponed, as fans raided the pitch. In response, Ed Woodward finally stepped down as chief executive of the club, much to the delight of the fans. And next was United's Europa League semi-final tie with Roma, where United absolutely slapped them 6-2 at Old Trafford, before 2 goals from Cavani and Rome secured an 8-5 aggregate victory to send United to the Europa League final for the second time in 5 years. Now, with 4 games to play, United were 10 points behind City in the league, meaning any points dropped would see City become champions. And next was Leicester at home, which they obviously lost 2-1 after goals by Luke Thomas and Cagliari Sayuncu, meaning City won the league. They then played the postponed game against Liverpool at Old Trafford, where a deflected Bruno strike put them a goal to the goods. But some absolutely hopeless defending allowed Nathan Collins to divert the ball into Jota, who flicked Liverpool level, before Firmino left Pogba in the dirt to put Liverpool ahead before half-time. Fred and Luke Shaw then both gave the ball away inside the space of 10 seconds, as Trent's shot was diverted directly to Firmino, who made it minute 3. Rashford went through and brought a goal back for United, just for Dean Henderson to give Salah half the goal to aim at and still a 4-2 win for Liverpool. United then played their first game with fans back in the stadium at home to Fulham, where Cavani scored a stunning goal from near halfway to make it 1-0, but a late header from Brian levelled the scores as United drew their final home game of the season. In their last Premier League game, Elanga bagged his first goal for the club away to Wolves before Juan Mata penalty secured a 2-1 win, as United finished the season second in the league on 74 points. It was their joint highest finish since the departure of Sir Alex Ferguson, but they still finished 12 points off the top, failing to solidify any genuine title race. But they still had the Europa League finals to play, with the chance to win silverware for the first time since winning the same tournament 4 years prior. And this time they faced Villarreal in Gdansk, where early on some poor marking led to Gerard Moreno opening the scores for Villarreal. It was looking like it'd be a rough day for United, but then a ricochet allowed the ball to land perfectly for Edinson Cavani to equalise, and the expectation was for United to kick on and get the job done. But a diabolical miss by Rashford saw the game go to extra time and then penalties, where every single player went on to score their spot kick, including Villarreal's goalkeeper, leaving the final penalty down to David De Gea, who feebly hit the softest penalty of all time to lose United the final. This bozo genuinely had the audacity to not save a single penalty out of 11 in the shootout before missing the deciding penalty, and Villarreal were the champions.
Man United, get out! Get out, Man United, get out!
So United lost to the Europa League final and endured yet another season without a trophy, meaning the expectations for Oli going into his 4th season at the club were incredibly high and silverware was needed. The 2021-22 season was crunch time for Oli. He had brought some positivity back to the club after years of toxicity, but ultimately had failed to bring in any trophy or make any significant progress in terms of challenging for the title. So this year the emphasis was on bringing silverware back to Old Trafford and cementing themselves in a genuine title race. And the club backed Oli this summer with big signings. First Dortmund superstar Jadon Sancho, and then 4-time Champions League winner and World Cup winner Raphael Varane to strengthen the defence. And the hype going into this new season was matched by the team in the opening game against Leeds, as Bruno grabbed his first hat-trick for the club, whilst Paul Pogba got 4 assists and a big 5-1 win to kick off the new Premier League season. Pogba then grabbed another assist away at Southampton for Greenwood, but they only managed a 1-1 draw. But they did get all 3 points away at Wolves with a late goal through Mason Greenwood. It was a good start to the season, but it was about to get a whole lot better, as Cristiano Ronaldo was suddenly linked to Manchester City at the end of the transfer window, and Manchester United could not let that happen. So they swooped in and re-signed Ronaldo on deadline day, making this already exciting United team even more exciting. The legend had returned.
Madeira, Manchester, Madrid, Turin, and Manchester again. CR7 reunited.
Cristiano Ronaldo made his second Manchester United debut at home to Newcastle United, and just before half-time, the moment happened, as Greenwood's shot was saved right into the path of Ronaldo, who tapped in and pulled out his iconic celebration. He ended up getting 2 goals on his return to Old Trafford, with Bruno Fernandes and Jesse Lingard also getting themselves on the score sheet as United flew to top of the league, and were now one of the favourites for the title. It took just 12 minutes for Ronaldo to score his first Champions League goal back at the club against Young Boys, but a Wan-Bissaka red card after an egregious first touch complicated things for the Red Devils, whilst Jadon Sancho produced one of the most comical performances the Champions League has ever seen, as he was struggling to adapt to his new club. As in the second half, Young Boys touched in an equaliser, and then in the 95th minute, Jesse Lingard played an impeccable through ball for Young Boys to win it at the death. What a bozo! United sought to bounce back away to West Ham, where Ben Rama put the host a goal up. Ronaldo scored once again to bring United back level, before Lingard scored a late banger to redeem himself to make it 2-1. But then in the last minute, West Ham won a penalty after a handball by Luke Shaw, and on came West Ham's captain Mark Noble to take it and level the scores. But it was flipping saved by De Gea. How embarrassing! United then played West Ham again in their next game, this time in the Carabao Cup, where a Lanzini goal knocked them out of the cup already. Their next Premier League game was at home to Villa, and an 89th minute Courtney Horse goal saw them go 1-0 down again, just for him to give away an even later penalty, giving United a chance to snatch a point. Bruno Fernandes took hold of the ball instead of Cristiano Ronaldo, and Emi Martinez made the most of this, pointing at Ronaldo to take the penalty instead, clearly getting into Bruno Fernandes' head, who buckled under the pressure and sent the penalty into orbit. Honestly, I think it's still travelling to this day. They then went 1-0 down to Villarreal again, this time in the Champions League at Old Trafford, but an inventive free kick by Bruno saw Telles volley home an equaliser, and then in the 95th minute the ball fell to Ronaldo in the box, who scored a stoppage time winner to save United, winning them their first 3 points in their Champions League group. Everton at home in the following match saw another tactical masterclass by Oli.
Either side could have gone top today, but it looks like neither of them will. United will go second against them.
as he produced one of the most incredible benches of all time, keeping all his best talent on the bench, whilst Andros Townsend equalised before producing the Ronaldo celebration in a 1-1 draw. Then they went away to Leicester where Mason Greenwood scored an absolute banger, just for this bozo Maguire to make this reprehensible error for Tielemans' equaliser. A scrap in the box then saw Leicester take the lead in the second half, but Rashford's first goal of the season brought United back level late on in this game. Then literally straight from kickoff, Leicester went up the other end, and Vardy whacked in another goal to make it 3-2.
We're back in it! We're back in it! You know, we're back in it, you twats! Oh, for fuck's sake! You're having a laugh!
Before Patson Daka converted at the back post to saw a 4-2 victory for Leicester, in what was also the game that Jadon Sancho secured his iconic 007 record in the Premier League. The pressure was now well and truly mounting on Oli. He had to beat Atalanta at home in the Champions League to keep hold of his job, and the United players did their best to show their support for their manager by going 2-0 down inside the first half. But in the second half, his side came alive, as Rashford found himself in behind and placed it past the keeper to get United back into the game. And then with 75 minutes on the clock, the ball fell to then inspiring captain Harry Maguire, who hammered home an equaliser. Then with 10 minutes to go, Shaw whipped it in and it was met by the head of Cristiano Ronaldo to complete the comeback and save United in the Champions League again. It was United 3, Atalanta 2. And next was big rivals Liverpool at home. A win here would really turn the tide back in Ollie's favour. So instead, their defence decided to part like the Red Sea inside 5 minutes, and Naby Keita made it 1-0. The Bozo brothers Maguire and Shaw then ran it back to the Tottenham game, getting in each other's way as Trent laid it across for Jota, and it was 2 already. Keita was then given acres of space to play across for Salah to get his first goal of the day, and then he'd go on to get his second just before half time. And it was 4-0 Liverpool. Old Trafford was seeing atrocities on the scale of 9/11 and the Holocaust. It was genuinely obscene, but I mean, they still had the second half to come back, right? And Ollie brought on Paul Pogba to try and change the tide, who got dispossessed by Jordan Henderson, who played through Salah to grab his hat-trick and make it 5-0. Ronaldo was able to cut back inside and pull back a consolation goal for United, except he didn't because it was offside. And then for good measure, Pogba decided to jump 2-foot into Keita and get himself sent off in what proved to be a worse sub than Ocean Gate, to round off potentially the most ludicrous, catastrophic and flat-out disastrous performance in Ollie's time as manager.
What do you mean breathe, breathe? Don't tell me to breathe. I can't be. Yo, bring me a shot. Bring me a shot.
The writing was well and truly on the wall for Ollie, and next up was a trip to Tottenham in a game dubbed as El Sacco, with Nuno also struggling at Tottenham, where a wonderful Ronaldo volley saw United take a first half lead, before second half goals by Edinson Cavani and Marcus Rashford saw United run out 3-0 winners. Nuno was sacked, and Ollie lived to see another day. Errors by both David De Gea and Harry Maguire saw United fall behind twice in their away game to Atalanta, meaning Ronaldo had to save them again in the Champions League with 2 goals in a 2-2 draw, before United hosted another one of their rivals, Manchester City at Old Trafford. And Eric Bailly decided to go the extra mile to get Ollie sacked by smacking it into his own net, before De Gea went one further, deciding to just not be a goalkeeper, as this effort by Bernardo Silva went straight at him and he let it go in, as United lost again, this time 2-0. But at least Ollie had the chance to get his team back on track as they went away to relegation battling Watford. Bruno didn't exactly help the cause by whacking the ball toward his own goal, as McTominay gave away an early penalty, but De Gea decided to actually save a shot this time, as Sarr failed to convert his penalty, and United had gotten away with it. Now it was time for them to go on and win the game. Oh wait, no, Josh King scored and it was 1-0 Watford. And then Sarr touched down in the box and smacked home to make up for his penalty miss. In the second half, Van der Beek was let out of Solskjaer's basement and headed in to pull one back for United. And just as United had the chance to get back into the game, Maguire decided that he had had enough and got himself sent off after a calamitous challenge. João Pedro then whacked a shot straight through De Gea to make it 3-1 Watford, and then for good measure, Emmanuel Dennis went through and slapped in a 4th, making it 4-1 to Watford.
Sorry for smiling there.
Ollie knew his time was up and said goodbye to the fans, and he was sacked the following day with the club sitting 8th in the table. He managed to survive longer than any manager post Fergie, but he was also the only one to not win anything whatsoever. And whilst he may have brought back some positive vibes to the club, ultimately he was never the man to take United back to the elite level. For the time being, Michael Carrick took charge, and in his first game, another crucial Ronaldo Champions League goal secured a win against Villarreal and top spot in the group. They then went away to Chelsea, where a mistake by Jorginho allowed Sancho to get his first Premier League goal, but then Wan-Bissaka stupidly gave away a penalty, which Jorginho scored to redeem himself as United dropped points again.
Man United, the game's about goals to go in.
Carrick's final game was at home to Arsenal, with Fred stamping on his own goalkeeper, allowing Smith Rowe the easiest long-range goal he will ever score. Despite that absurd run of events, United still came back to win this game 3-2. 2, with a crucial Ronaldo penalty the deciding factor to grab the 3 points. United then brought in Ralf Rangnick as interim for the rest of the season, a man who is seen as the godfather of modern coaching in Germany, signalling a change in direction at the club. And he won both of his first 2 games 1-0, with goals from Fred against Crystal Palace and Ronaldo against Norwich, firing United up to 5th in the league. However, his perfect start ended away to Newcastle, where St. Maximin danced through the entire defence to slap in an opener, but a scrappy Cavani equalised to ensure they didn't lose either. They weren't able to respond to Moutinho's opener at Old Trafford for Wolves though, as they lost their opening game of 2022, before going 2-0 up at Villa Park through 2 Bruno Fernandes goals, just to throw it away, first conceding to Jacob Ramsey, and then allowing former Liverpool player Coutinho to level the scores at 2-2. 2 wins in their final 2 games of January fired United into the top 4 for the first time since October, but their improved form on the pitch was overshadowed by one of their players' antics off the pitch, as an audio tape was leaked of Mason Greenwood and his treatment of his then girlfriend, leading to him being suspended by the club, and he would never play for them again. This was followed by United's FA Cup home tie against Middlesbrough, where Ronaldo inexplicably missed the first half penalty. Less than 5 minutes later, Sancho put United a goal up, and they were expected to go on and comfortably win the game. But in the second half, Crooks tapped in to equalise against these absolute crooks, sending the game to penalties, with the Langer skying in sudden death, meaning Middlesbrough had won and United were out of the FA Cup. They followed this up with 1-1 draws away to Burnley and at home to Southampton, before a Champions League round of 16 tie against Atletico Madrid, where a João Felix header put them 1-0 down in the first leg, but Langer got in behind to grab an equaliser to make United favourites heading into the second leg. However, Lodi scored the only goal at Old Trafford in a 1-0 win for Atletico, as they won 2-1 on aggregate. And with United knocked out of the Champions League, it would be their 5th trophyless season in a row, as their fans threw bottles at Simeone whilst he was heading down the tunnel. They also went away to the Etihad, where 2 goals by Kevin De Bruyne and 2 goals by Riyad Mahrez saw them lose 4-1, putting a large dent in their top 4 hopes. But a home game against Antonio Conte's Tottenham gave them the chance to keep their hopes alive, as Ronaldo slapped in an absolute banger from range to put United into the ascendancy. A Kane penalty brought the game back level, before Ronaldo tapped in to make it 2-1 to United. Just for Maguire to his best Harry Kane impression, scoring for Tottenham. But it was that man again, Cristiano Ronaldo, who came up clutch, getting his first hat-trick of the season to win United the game 3-2, and United were back in the top 4 race. But they followed this up by dropping points at home to Leicester, where Rashford had the chance to win it at the death, but Langer kicked him to the floor, and then away to Everton thanks to another Maguire own goal. They then let a 2-goal lead slip at home to bottom place Norwich, needing another Ronaldo hat-trick to salvage them the 3 points, scoring a wonderful free kick for his 3rd. But he couldn't help them at Anfield, where Liverpool ran absolutely rampant, smashing 4 past them without reply, making it a 9-0 aggregate scoreline against their bitter rivals that season. Varane and Alex Telles then both completely missed the ball, as Nuno Tavares tucked home a rebound to put Arsenal a goal ahead at the Emirates, before a Bukayo Saka penalty made it 2. Ronaldo got United back into the game from close range, but then for the 2nd time this season, United won a penalty, and instead of Ronaldo taking it, Bruno stepped up, and yet again he flipping missed it, hitting the post, before a Granit Xhaka thunderbolt ended United's top 4 hopes with 4 games to play. Volleys by both Marcos Alonso and Cristiano Ronaldo, so United and Chelsea share the spoils at Old Trafford, and then their season reached a new low, holding 4 goals away to Brighton in a 4-0 dismantling, after goals from Caicedo, Cucurella, Gross and Trossard. Before in their final game of the season, Wilfried Zaha scored again against his former club to close off what was truly a diabolical season for Manchester United. It was a new record low points total for the club, as they slumped to a 6th place finish. After all that hype at the start of the season, to finish trophyless and 13 points off the top 4, this was probably United's most disappointing season so far. Ralf Rangnick left the club at the end of the season to manage Austria. When he came in, he told the owners to put every single player on the transfer market, as the club needed a complete rebuild. But obviously the club didn't listen, and instead decided to continue the exact same model that had gotten them into this mess in the first place. At the end of the previous season, it was announced that Ajax manager Erik ten Hag would become the new Manchester United manager, who'd won 3 league titles in the Netherlands and taken Ajax to a Champions League semi-final in 2019. And there was real excitement around this appointment. This summer also saw the departure of Edinson Cavani, Jesse Lingard, Juan Mata, Nemanja Matic, Paul Pogba, Eric Bailly and Alex Telles, whilst ten Hag brought in Tyrell Malacia and Lisandro Martinez from the Netherlands, Christian Eriksen on a free, and for some reason Tom Huddleston as well, who I thought had retired by then, but apparently not. And with all the excitement for Ten Hag's first game at home to Brighton, 2 goals from Pascal Gross put them 2-0 down in the first half, whilst Ronaldo was sat on the bench. A McAllister own goal got United back into the game, but they were unable to find an equaliser as Ten Hag lost his first game in charge 2-1. Then in his second game, he took United away to Brentford, where Josh Da Silva shot from range, giving De Gea an easy save. Except he let it go straight through him and into the back of the net. What a flippin' bozo! And then he played a dangerous pass to Eriksen, who was dispossessed, as Jensen tucked in a second for Brentford, before the Hobbit Martinez got dunked on by Ben Mee for Brentford to make it 3, and then Mbeumo held off Luke Shaw and scored a 4th for Brentford, making it Brentford 4, Manchester United 0 before half time. And that's how the game finished, as United wound up bottom of the league. And next up was Liverpool. Their big rivals were massive favourites for this game, but United actually won as Jadon Sancho sat down 2 Liverpool players and converted before Marcus Rashford got in behind and finished at the near post in a massive 2-1 victory for the Red Devils. They then pulled off the shock signing of Real Madrid legend Casemiro for £70 million before winning their next 2 games 1-0 against both Southampton and Leicester, making it 3 wins in a row. And then they announced their most exciting signing yet, a Brazilian wonder kid that Erik ten Hag brought to prominence in the Dutch league with Ajax, Antony. For £80 million, he was set to be the man to transform Manchester United's right wing position, and it didn't take him long to impress, as on his debut against league leaders Arsenal he put United 1-0 in front before pulling out this diabolical celebration. Saka went on to equalise in the second half, but 2 goals on the counter by Marcus Rashford made it 4 wins in a row for United as they climbed up to 5th in the table, and it seemed like not only were Manchester United back, but Marcus Rashford was as well. They did lose their opening Europa League game to Real Sociedad at home 1-0, but were going to win their remaining 5 games to qualify as second in the group. And back in the Premier League, they faced Manchester City at the Etihad, a test to truly show that they meant business this season. So they decided to go 4-0 down inside the first half. Antony scored a screamer to make it 4-1 in his second Premier League game, but Haaland and Foden both went on to complete their hat-tricks in the second half, as 2 late goals by Anthony Martial simply made the scoreline more respectable for United. Away at Everton, Ronaldo scored his first and last goal of the season in the Premier League, whilst a 2-0 win over Tottenham and a last gasp equaliser at Stamford Bridge by Casemiro meant that United were just a point off the Champions League places heading into November. But the cracks began to show again away to Aston Villa in Unai Emery's first game at the club, as Bailey, Digne and Ramsey all scored in a 3-1 Villa win, before United then required a last minute winner by Garnacho to win the 3 points away to Fulham. After this game, the Premier League paused for the World Cup, but the drama of United wasn't over, as Cristiano Ronaldo had been frustrated at his lack of game time, and even refused to come on as a late substitute against Tottenham, instead walking early down the tunnel. And after the season had come to a standstill for the World Cup, he filmed a controversial interview with Piers Morgan, calling out Ten Hag and the club, stating that he didn't respect the new Manchester United manager. The interview sent shockwaves through the footballing world, and Ronaldo was subsequently released from his contract by the club. However, when club football returned, United didn't actually miss Ronaldo, as Marcus Rashford took his form to a whole new level, scoring 7 goals in United's next 6 games in all competitions, as they won all 6 going into the Manchester derby against Man City at Old Trafford. They went 1-0 down to a Jack Grealish header in the second half, but a controversial late Bruno goal was somehow not ruled offside, before an even later Marcus Rashford goal won the derby for United, to go 1 point behind City, and now they genuinely believe they were in a title race. Bruno then whacked them 1-0 up away to Palace, but a Casemiro yellow card meant he would miss their next game away to Arsenal, and to rub salt in the wounds, Elise scored a last minute free kick to grab Palace a draw, meaning if they were serious about the title race, they would have to go away to league leaders Arsenal and win to close the gap to 5 points.
3, 2, 1, go.
And once again it was Marcus Rashford doing the business for United, nutmegging Partey and scoring a banger to make it 1-0. However, shortly after Nketiah equalised with a header, and then a Bukayo Saka rocket turned the game on its head as he copied Rashford's new celebration. United were able to get back into the game as the Hobbit Martinez headed in an equaliser, but United hearts were broken in stoppage time after Eddie Nketiah flicked in a last minute winner to realistically end any hopes of a Manchester United title challenge. Meanwhile, the club brought in Wout Weghorst and Marcel Sabitzer to bolster the squad in January, and a 5-0 aggregate win over Nottingham Forest in the Carabao Cup semis meant they would head to Wembley in February, before they then faced Barcelona in the Europa League round of 32, where an inspired Marcus Rashford performance at the Camp Nou helped them to a 2-2 draw to take back to Old Trafford. But in the home leg they fell behind to a Lewandowski penalty. However, they came back in the second half with goals by Fred and Antony, seeing United knock Barcelona out and progress in the Europa League as Old Trafford went wild. And then they had the Carabao Cup final at Wembley against Newcastle, going 1-0 up to a first half Casemiro header, and then got a second as Rashford forced an own goal, winning the game 2-0 and securing both Ten Hag's first trophy at United and United's first trophy since 2017. Meanwhile, late goals against West Ham by Garnacho and Fred saw United storm through to the FA Cup quarter-finals. United were third in the Premier League, had progressed through in the Europa League and FA Cup, and had won the first trophy of the season. Everything was looking great. At the same time, Liverpool were having a disastrous season, down in 6th and 10 points behind United. And next up, the two sides face each other at Anfield. Everything felt set for United to get their first win at Anfield since January 2016. But this game ended up being one of the most diabolical, hopeless, nefarious performances in football history. Shortly before half-time, Fred found himself in no man's land, allowing Gakpo to get in behind, cut inside and make it 1-0. But going into the second half, United were only 1-0 down and could easily get back into this game. But instead, they went on to produce the most redonkulous catalogue of errors one half of football has ever seen. First, Shaw gave away a simple pass, before Weghorst completely missed the ball. Casemiro then showed the ball control of a disorientated, discombobulated mongoose, before literally just falling over. And then Shaw gave the ball straight to Elliott, who crossed into Nunes to make it 2-0. But we weren't done there. In fact, we were just getting started. as Salah proceeded to absolutely spin Martinez inside out and upside down, leaving this bozo on the floor eating grass. Never before have I seen a player dogged as much as this. It has to be a crime against humanity. Salah then played it into Gakpo, who chipped in his second and Liverpool's third. McTominay went on to get a world-class bum assist for Salah to smash in a fourth from the volley, before Henderson clipped it in for Nunes to head home and make it 5-0. Luke Shaw then preposterously toe punched the ball into Firmino before it bounced into Salah's path to tap it in. And at this point, just retire, because are you even trying? Salah then played through Firmino to score Liverpool's 7th in his final game against Manchester United, and somehow for each goal the defending gets more comical, because why is this bozo Dallo standing inside the goal? Honestly, it was a result that could have gotten Ten Hag sacked on the spot, because what the actual flip? I don't think I've ever seen so many bozo moments in a single game. United followed this up with a 0-0 draw to Southampton as Casemiro got sent off for the second time that season, before losing 2-0 away to Newcastle. It seemed like Manchester United were collapsing in the Premier League. In the FA Cup they went 1-0 down at Old Trafford to Fulham, but then Fulham completely lost their heads, getting 2 red cards as United were able to turn the tie on its head and send themselves back to Wembley again. Then was the Europa League quarter-final against their old arch nemesis Sevilla, and United were looking for revenge after 2018 and 2020. 2 Sabitzer goals inside 20 minutes put United 2-0 up, and they were looking comfortable. But a late Malacia own goal got Sevilla back into the game, and an even later Maguire own goal made it 2-2, and Sevilla had turned it around. And then the second leg was an absolute disaster. First, De Gea and Maguire combined to produce this calamity and it was 1-0 Sevilla. De Gea then got beat by a looping header early into the second half, before making a horror mistake as En-Nesyri made it 3-0. Honestly, is this guy discombobulated or something? It was an embarrassing night for United, and they were knocked out by Sevilla yet again. However, they managed to go 2-0 up in their next game away to Tottenham, just to let that lead slip as well, with Son equalising late on. A Luke Shaw handball gave away a last-minute penalty at Brighton, which McAllister scored to get revenge for that Bruno penalty after the final whistle in 2020. And then another diabolical De Gea howler versus West Ham saw them lose 1-0 again. United were all over the place, but they had the FA Cup semi-final against Brighton where they could redeem themselves. The game ended 0-0 and went to penalties, where United made their way to the final after a solid March miss from the spot. They also won their final 4 games of the season, including a 4-1 home win over Chelsea to secure 3rd spot in the Premier League on 75 points. A rather impressive Premier League campaign after the last season and the start they had to this season. And to close it all off, they had the FA Cup final against their rivals Manchester City, who themselves were gunning for the treble, and it was United who had the chance to stop them and save their own record. So of course they were going to turn up in this game, except they conceded after 12 flipping seconds to Gundogan, and ended up losing the game 2-1 after yet another De Gea blunder, as Gundogan grabbed a brace to win City the cup. Meaning that despite it being a relatively successful season, it ended on a rather sour note, which United would look to rectify in Ten Hag's second season. United enter Ten Hag's second season now seen as genuine title contenders, looking to build on their 3rd place finish from last season and to add more silverware to their cabinet. Club legends David De Gea, Phil Jones and Fred had all left the club, with the club seeking to solve their goalkeeper problem by bringing in the Champions League goalkeeper of the tournament Andre Onana to elevate their team. They also brought in Mason Mount from Chelsea in a shock move, as well as highly tipped youngster Rasmus Højlund to solve their striker issues. Oh, and they brought back Johnny Evans 8 years after he initially left the club because he was already washed. Why they did that, I will never know. Sergio Reguilon and World Cup star Sofian Amrabat also both joined on loan as United attempted to bolster their squad depth. They began their season at home to Wolves, who carved them open constantly throughout this game. But a Rafael Varane header and this Onana punch on his debut somehow not being given as a penalty meant United escaped on the opening day with 3 points. However, they followed this up with a 2-0 loss away to Tottenham, with the Butcher butchering this into his own flipping net. And then they went 2-0 down at home to Nottingham Forest, with Onana deciding to give Awanri the easiest chance of his damn life. But they were able to complete a big comeback, with Bruno Fernandes making it 3-2 from the penalty spot, before Rashford turned up at the Emirates and scored a beautiful goal again. But just like the previous season, United's lead didn't last as Odegaard made it 1-1 almost instantly. However, unlike last season, Garnacho went through in the 89th minute to win the game for Manchester United in a shock smash and grab victory. Except the goal was ruled out for offside, allowing Declan Rice to score an even later goal to make it 2-1 to Arsenal in stoppage time, and then for good measure Gabriel Jesus and Dallo sliding like a bozo before sealing the 3 points for Arsenal. Ten Hag was furious after this game, exposing his stupidity because this Garnacho goal was literally objectively offside. Danny Welbeck scored once again against his former side, this time for Brighton, before Pascal Gross scored again at Old Trafford. And then for the second game running they lost 3-1 as João Pedro's shot made it past Onana, with Onana pulling off another spectacular show of incompetence away to Bayern in a 4-3 loss in United's opening Champions League game, as Anderson went on to volley home the only goal in United's next game at Old Trafford for Crystal Palace. However, Rasmus Højlund was in on the goals in the Champions League, scoring twice against Galatasaray in United's second Champions League game. It's just a shame the rest of the team was a bunch of diabolical buffoons, as Rashford somehow managed to mess up this chance. points, whilst Diogo Dalot allowed Wilfried Zaha to get in behind and score against his former club, before Galatasaray made it 2-2 with 20 minutes to go. Onana proceeded to pass it straight to Dries Mertens, who was taken down by Casemiro in the box, who was sent off for a second yellow card. United thought they'd gotten away with it as Icardi missed a penalty, just for Amrabat to disastrously keep Icardi onside as he went through and chipped Onana to win the game for Galatasaray. But honestly, what on earth is this deplorable bozo doing on the floor? Yet another Onana error let Brentford take the lead at Old Trafford, meaning they required 2 stoppage time Scott McTominay goals to save them the 3 points. A late Maguire header saw them take a 1-0 lead at home to Copenhagen, but these bozos couldn't help themselves, giving away a last-minute penalty. However, Onana remembered that he's actually a goalkeeper and made a save for once, giving United hope that they might still qualify in the Champions League. Their joy didn't last long though, as 2 goals from Erling Haaland and then a third by Phil Foden saw them torn apart in their home stadium by their City rivals, with Antony deciding to kick the living daylight out of Doku and somehow not get sent off. And they followed this up by losing 3-0 at home again, this time to Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. They did go on to win 3 Premier League games in a row, including this remarkable Garnacho overhead kick against Everton, taking them up to 6th, 4 points off the top 4. But this was overshadowed by their Champions League game away to Copenhagen, where they needed to win to give them a chance of making the knockouts. And they sped into an early 2-goal lead in this game as Højlund scored twice. But then the task got a whole lot harder as Rashford got sent off for this challenge in the first half. But it was Copenhagen, so surely they could just hold on, right? Well, before half time the hosts pulled 1 goal back, and then 5 minutes later Maguire gave away a penalty, and Copenhagen equalised before half time. However, in the second half, United won a penalty of their own to retake the lead, which Bruno scored, and now they had another lead to hold on to. But with 10 minutes to go, Dalot was sleeping at the back post and allowed Copenhagen to level the scores again. And then Varane pulled off possibly the worst clearance of all time. Seriously, he looks disabled, bruh. And it then fell to the edge of the box, and then all of a sudden it was 4-3 to Copenhagen, meaning the next Champions League game away to Galatasaray was their last chance to remain in the competition. And once again they went 2-0 up with bangers from Garnacho and Bruno Fernandes, but some more diabolical shenanigans by Onana allowed Galatasaray route back into the game. However, it was McTominay who came up clutch again, making it 3-1 United in the second half, and they were on their way to the knockouts. Just for Onana to make an even bigger bozo error from another Ziyech free kick, and then Galatasaray smacked in a third, and it was 3-3, and United were effectively out of Europe already. They redeemed themselves by then losing only 1-0 to Newcastle this time, before hosting Chelsea at Old Trafford, with 2 McTominay goals enough to see them pick up the 3 points. But then early on against Bournemouth, Amrabat showed the pace of a snail with Parkinson's as he let Lewis Cook run through and set up Solanke to go behind at Old Trafford. And then in the second half, Billing headed home to make it 2-0 for Bournemouth, before 5 minutes later Senesi scored from a corner, meaning United lost 3-0 at home yet again. Their Champions League exit was finally confirmed as they lost 1-0 at home to Bayern at Old Trafford, with Onana once again looking like a bozo, as United finished bottom of a Champions League group containing Galatasaray and Copenhagen, in what has to be the most embarrassing Champions League campaign by any English club ever. Miraculously, they managed to draw 0-0 at Anfield, just to then lose 2-0 away to West Ham, as Bowen played a 1-2 of Onana to leave him looking like a bozo again, as United fell to 8th from the table, when they then faced Champions League chasing Aston Villa at home, and went 2-0 down to 2 absolutely diabolical goals from corners. However, 2 Garnacho goals brought the game back to 2-2, and then a Christmas miracle happened, as Højlund finally got his first Premier League goal in his 15th game to make it 3-2. But then things returned to normal as United conceded 2 identical goals away to Nottingham Forest as they lost again 2-1, before taking the lead twice away to Tottenham, but failing to win as the game ended as a 2-2 draw after a second half equalised by Bentancur, and then taking a routine 2-goal lead against League 2 opposition Newport County in the FA Cup, just to embarrassingly get pegged back to 2-2 in the second half, relying on Antony to get his first goal of the season to save them as they eventually won 4-2. Once again in the next game they went 2-0 up, this time going away to Wolves. Pablo Sarabia converted a penalty to get Wolves back into the game, but Scott McTominay was able to restore United's 2-goal advantage with 15 minutes to play. Wolves pulled back another goal late on from a set piece, before Pedro Neto grabbed a 95th minute equaliser, and it looked like United had bottled it again. But up stepped Kobbie Mainoo, who dribbled past 3 players and whipped it into the bottom corner to win it for United even later on with his first ever Premier League goal, and it looked like United had produced a new start. United then won their next 3 games in a row versus West Ham, Villa and Luton, taking them up to 6th, as Højlund made it 6 games in a row that he had scored it. They then went 1-0 down at Old Trafford to a Calvin Bassey dagger, but they thought a last minute Maguire goal had salvaged a point for them, just for Alex Iwobi to cut back and score an even later winner for Fulham at Old Trafford. In their next game, Rashford produced this bullet to score just his 6th goal of the season to put United 1-0 up at the Etihad. However, in the second half, Phil Foden came alive with 2 stunning goals, before this bambling bozo Amrabat gave Haaland the chance to make it 3. Next up was the FA Cup quarter-final against Liverpool at Old Trafford, with Liverpool as heavy favourites. But early on, McTominay tucked in a rebound to put the hosts into the lead. However, before half-time, Alexis McAllister and Mo Salah turned the game around, and it seemed like United would be heading out. Then incredibly, in the 87th minute, Antony spun and shot to score just his second goal of the season, before Rashford just played through to win it, but inexplicably missed, sending the game to extra time, where Harvey Elliott looked to have won the game for Liverpool from range. However, Rashford made up for his miss, keeping his composure to grab a 112th minute equaliser. And then, as Liverpool were looking to win it, United hit them on the counter, as Amad Diallo fired in a last-gasp winner with his first goal of the season. He was sent off for a celebration, but he didn't care as United went into the semis. Mason Mount then finally got his first goal for the club with a 96th minute winner against Brentford, or at least he thought it was a winner, as Brentford scored an even later goal to equalise in the 99th minute and break United hearts. They followed this up with a trip to Chelsea, where once again Onana let a tame shot go through him from Gallagher, before a Palmer penalty made it 2-0 Chelsea, but then Caicedo played it straight to Garnacho, who got United back into the game, as Bruno headed in an equaliser to make it 2-2 before half time. Then in the second half, Ante pulled off a phantasmagorical Trivela assist for Garnacho to head in and complete the turnaround. Miraculously, United were now 3-2 up, just for Diogo Dalot to take down Madueke in the box in the 100th minute, allowing Palmer to score again from the spot to earn Chelsea a draw at the death. And that was supposed to be it. But then these preposterous bozos left Palmer and Marks on the edge of the box, and he smacked in a 101st minute winner, making it 4-3 to Chelsea. Somehow these absolute imbeciles were 3-2 up in the 99th minute and lost the flipping game. How is that even possible? They had to follow that up by hosting title-chasing Liverpool at Old Trafford, who went 1-0 up in the first half through Luis Diaz. Then inexplicably, Quansah played it straight to Bruno Fernandes, who equalised from halfway, before Kobe Mainoo picked up the ball inside the box, turned and slapped it into the top corner past Kelleher. It was a beauty to put United into a shock lead, but obviously someone had to ruin it, as Wan-Bissaka gave away a penalty, and of course Onana couldn't save it, with Salah making it 2-2, with United drawing 2-2 again in their next game away to Bournemouth, seeing them slip to 7th in the league table. Then they had the FA Cup semi-final against Championship side Coventry, where they went 3-0 up in a comfortable game at Wembley and were absolutely coasting, just for Coventry to shock United, putting 2 goals back in quick succession with 10 minutes left to play. And then Wan-Bissaka gave away a 95th minute penalty, scored by Haji Riot, and from out of nowhere it was 3-3. Then in extra time, Coventry scored a last second winner, but fortunately for United it was ruled offside by the fraction of a millimetre, meaning the game went to penalties, where Rasmus Højlund scored the deciding spot kick to send United into the final, and Antony decided to celebrate in front of the Coventry players. Very classy. And even though they made the final, bottling a 3-0 lead in the semi-finals to Coventry was beyond embarrassing. Antony then went on to get his first Premier League goal of the season at home to Burnley on the 27th of April and celebrated by pulling out Sonnet. But then later on, Casemiro decided to pull out this move before Onana punched Amdouni in the head. Amdouni then converted his penalty and United had dropped points yet again. Casemiro then completely capitulated away to Crystal Palace.
Leave the football before the football leaves you.
As Olise went through to put Palace 1-0 ahead. Mateta then skipped past Evans and made it 2 before half time, and then Mitchell tapped in a third in the second half. Casemiro then got absolutely bullied to the floor as Olise slapped in a 4th for Palace in a beyond embarrassing game for United. In the following game, Casemiro played Havertz about 20 yards onside, allowing him to get in behind and set up Trossard for their 14th league loss of the season. And 2 wins in their final 2 games wasn't enough as they finished the season down in 8th. Their lowest finish ever in the Premier League season, and on a negative goal difference for the first time ever as well. It was a genuinely disastrous season that no one had anticipated. But they had one last chance to salvage it in the FA Cup final against Manchester City, a repeat of last season's final. And if they lost last season when they were actually a decent team, how did they think they had any chance this time around? They were obviously going to lose comfortably, right? Wrong. An error at the back let Garnacho get in behind and tap into an empty net before Bruno pulled off a spectacular assist for Kobe Mainoo to make it 2. The academy graduates were winning the final for the Red Devils, and City couldn't do anything to stop them. Of course, Onana was up to his usual antics of letting the ball go through him for a goal, but United held on for a shock 2-1 win in the FA Cup final over Manchester City, as Ten Hag won his 2nd trophy in as many seasons at United. Unlike for Van Gaal, it was a result that had saved his job after a horrific campaign in every other competition, with the trophy meaning that United had qualified for the Europa League for the following season. As Ten Hag entered his 3rd season at the club, he was under immense pressure from the get-go. It felt like at any slip-up his job could be taken away from him, and the expectation was to make it back into the Champions League places following a disastrous season. The club backed him in the summer, spending over £200 million on the likes of Lenny Yoro, Joshua Zirkzee, Matthias de Ligt, Mazraoui and Manuel Ugarte, whilst letting go of Scott McTominay, Wan-Bissaka, Van der Beek, Anthony Martial and Raphael Varane. They kicked off the new season in the Community Shield at Wembley in a repeat of the FA Cup final, where Garnacho put them into a late lead, thinking he had won his side the game, but a last-minute Bernardo Silva header sent the game to penalties. Onana tried his best to put off Haaland and failed absolutely miserably, as Jadon Sancho and Johnny Flippin Evans failed to score their penalties, allowing City to win the Community Shield. Just like last season, United won the opening Premier League game 1-0 at Old Trafford, as Joshua Zirkzee scored a late winner in his debut against Fulham, before going away to Brighton in their second game, where Danny Welbeck scored against them again, as Harry Maguire showed the mobility of a pensioner without limbs. They did manage to equalise as Ahmad cut inside and smashed it into the net, and then a few minutes later they came forward again to put themselves into the lead, but the ball hit Zirkzee, who was offside, and it got ruled out. Then in the final minute, a Dingo cut back, and for some reason no one was marking the back post as he played it over to João Pedro, who won the game for Brighton. United's next game was at home to Liverpool, with a chance to make a real statement about how flippin' bad they are, and in particular, Casemiro again. The word bozo doesn't even do it justice, because this Brazilian bum is one of the most insufferably bad players I've ever seen set foot on a football pitch. He gave the ball away for the first goal with a stupid pass as Salah set up Diaz, and then he was weak on the ball again, allowing Salah and Diaz to combine once more to make it 2. Starboy Kobe Manu then gave the ball away himself for Liverpool's third, this time for Mo Salah to score, and United lost again. They looked to be back on track as they secured a big 3-0 win away to the relegation rival Southampton, but followed this up with a poor result, drawing their opening Europa League game 1-1 at home to FC Twente. And then they faced Tottenham at Old Trafford, where they let a centre-back run through their entire team and set up Brennan Johnson to make it 1-0. Bruno Fernandes then got sent off for this challenge on James Maddison, before Kulusevski touched home for Tottenham second. And if that wasn't bad enough, Solanke scored again at Old Trafford, making it 3-0 for the second home game in a row. Bruno then got sent off for the second game in a row, this time away at Porto, but a last-minute Maguire header salvaged them a point, before going away to Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce, where En-Nesyri's second half header meant United drew again. Meanwhile, in the Premier League, 2 second half goals by Garnacho and Højlund against Brentford saw them win just their second game of the season, before heading away to West Ham, where Bruno somehow managed to head over from 10 yards out before Dalot went through and missed an open goal. You can tell the United players are really trying their best to get Ten Hag sacked. In the second half, Somerville stuck in at the back post put West Ham in front, but later on Casemiro was able to equalise and save United a point, just for De Ligt to take Ings down in the box, and in the final minute, Bowen won the game from the penalty spot. The final nail in the coffin of Erik Ten Hag, who was sacked with United down in 14th after 9 games played. He had managed to bring trophies back to Old Trafford, but he also produced United's worst ever Premier League finish, and after a terrible start to his third season, his time was up. Van Nistelrooy came in as interim, who oversaw a 1-1 draw of Chelsea in his first Premier League game in charge, followed by a 3-0 win over Leicester. And then the club completed the acquisition of Sporting Lisbon manager Ruben Amorim, who had won 2 league titles for Sporting after 20 years without one, and had recently overseen a 4-1 win over United's rivals Man City in the Champions League. It was a very exciting appointment after the horrors of Ten Hag, and United fans were optimistic that they could still challenge for the top 4 with a long way of the season to go. In his first game, Ahmad set up Rashford to score within just 2 minutes, but an incredible Omari Hutchinson equaliser meant the game ended 1-1. His second game saw some poor defending, but United came back from 2-1 down to beat Bozo Glimt in the Europa League. And then in his first Premier League game at Old Trafford, they wiped the floor with Everton, winning comfortably 4-0 as Rashford and Zirkzee both scored twice. It seemed like Amorim might actually be the man to bring United back to the big time, and his first real test was away to Arsenal. However, their defence was undone by 2 set pieces and they failed to reply, with Marcus Rashford attempting to do keepy-ups by the corner flag, but ended up giving away the second corner that Arsenal scored from. And then they followed this up, losing 3-2 at home to Nottingham Forest, with Onana proving once again he is a diabolical bozo not to be trusted on a football pitch, whilst Lisandro Martinez was genuinely just flippin' useless. It was a result that put extra pressure on United heading into Amorim's first derby game, away at the Etihad, where they went 1-0 down to a Gvardiol header, and that's how it seemed the game would end. But then out of nowhere, United won an 88th minute penalty, which Bruno tucked home to level up the scores, before Amad Diallo touched it over Ederson and slotted it in to win United the derby in the last minute. It was a shock win for United, which looked set to truly kickstart Amorim's career at the club, as they then went away to Tottenham in the Carabao Cup quarter-final, and then reverted back to type, producing some simply hopeless defending to allow Tottenham to take a 3-0 lead. Fraser Forster tried his absolute best to help United get back into the game, gifting them 2 goals, but then Son scored directly from a corner to put Tottenham 4-2 up, and United end up losing the game 4-3 and were out of the Carabao Cup. Then, for the second season in a row, Manchester United lost 3-0 at home to flippin' Bournemouth in yet another embarrassing defeat, before heading away to Wolves where Bruno Fernandes picked up his 3rd red card of the season, as United conceded directly from a corner for the second time in 3 games, this time through Mateus Cunha, who then picked up a last-minute assist to condemn United to a 2-0 defeat. And then in their final game of 2024, headers from both Alexander Isak and Joel Linton put Newcastle 2-0 up at Old Trafford, with Joshua Zirkzee being subbed off before half-time and booed off by the United fans. It was a truly tragic end to the year, as United finished 2024 14th in the Premier League, 13 points off 4th and 23 points behind first place Liverpool, who they faced next. Liverpool were obviously massive favourites, but Lisandro Martinez actually hammered in a shock opener for Manchester United. However, Cody Gakpo grabbed an expected equaliser before De Ligt gave away a penalty soon after, scored by Mo Salah, and Liverpool were ahead. But then from out of nowhere, Garnacho played it across for Amad Diallo to score a second for United, and they even had the chance to win it late on, but Maguire skied this chance from close range as it finished all square at Anfield. It was a shock draw for United, who then went away to Arsenal in the FA Cup, where again they took a shock lead as Bruno slapped in the opening goal. But a red card for Diogo Dalot seemed to tilt the tie in Arsenal's favour, as Gabriel hammered in an equaliser for the hosts, before Havertz was given a penalty for this, as Ødegaard stepped up to send Arsenal into the next round of the FA Cup. But it was saved by Altay Bayındır, sending the game to extra time and penalties, where Bayındır saved again, this time from Havertz. And Joshua Zirkzee sent United into the next round just 2 weeks after being booed off by his own fans. It was two massive results for Amorim to gain the confidence of the United fans. The alarm bell started to go off again though as they went 1-0 down at home to bottom place Southampton, before Anthony missed an open goal from 6 yards out. But then Amad Diallo stepped up again for United, scoring a 10-minute hat-trick at the end of the game to save United and turn the game around. Meanwhile, in the January transfer window, Anthony and Rashford were both loaned out, whilst the club brought in left-back Patrick Dorgu. Their good form wouldn't last though, as they went on to lose 3 of their next 4 games. First losing 3-1 at home against Brighton, with Onana somehow letting this ball go the whole way through, and then completely fumbling the ball to allow Ruta to get Brighton's third. And then Mateta grabbed 2 goals from close range for Crystal Palace at Old Trafford, before yet another error by Onana allowed James Maddison to tap in the only goal of the game for Tottenham, as Manchester United slipped to 15th in the table. Onana then conceded this embarrassing goal, as United went 2 goals down at Everton, but this time they were able to fight back with 2 late goals to salvage a draw. This complete mix-up between Dorgu and Onana saw Ipswich then take the lead at Old Trafford, as Dorgu was then later sent off for this challenge as well, but a second half Harry Maguire header saw them come back to win 3-2. Calvin Bassey scored again at Old Trafford, this time in the FA Cup, but a Bruno leveller in the second half sent the game to penalties, where Lindelof and Zirkzee both had their tame efforts saved by Bernd Leno, as Fulham knocked United out the FA Cup. However, in Europe, United were in better form, with a Bruno hat-trick versus Sociedad at Old Trafford seeing United progress into the Europa League quarter-finals, and then a 3-0 win away to Leicester meant United climbed up to 13th in the Premier League table. It seemed like they were finally in good form, but then Ante Elanga came back to haunt them after a run from his own half to give Forest a 1-0 win. And 2 more truly terrible errors by Andre Onana away to Lyon saw the hosts grab a 95th minute equaliser in a 2-2 draw. Like, what's even the point of this guy, man? They followed this up with an embarrassing 4-1 loss away to Newcastle, where Harvey Barnes ran them absolutely ragged after some more awful defending, before then welcoming Lyon to Old Trafford in the Europa League quarter-final second leg. United went 2-0 up in this game through goals by Ugarte and Diogo Dalot, but 2 late goals by Lyon saw themselves get back into the game and level it up at 2-2. However, a harsh Tolisso red card gave United the advantage heading into extra time. They weren't able to make the most of it though, as Ryan Cherki smacked in the third for Lyon to complete the comeback, before a late penalty was converted by Lacazette to all but certainly confirm Lyon's place in the semi-finals. But what happened next was truly remarkable. First, United won a penalty of their own, which Bruno stepped up to score with 6 minutes to play, before Kobe Mainoo picked up the ball in the box and scored in the last minute to get United back on level terms. And then a minute later, with adrenaline pulsating through the veins, Harry Maguire unbelievably headed home the winner for Manchester United. It was one of the craziest comebacks in European football history, and Manchester United were Europa League semi-finalists again. Normality resumed in the Premier League as United lost 1-0 at home to Wolves, before a 96-minute Højlund equaliser saved them from losing 3 in a row. They then went 4-1 down away to Brentford, with 2 late consolation goals making the scoreline slightly more respectable, and then lost 2-0 at home to West Flippin' Ham. Chelsea made it 3 losses in a row as Cucurella headed in the only goal of the game, condemning United to 16th in the league. Honestly, these bozos were inspiring the future generations of spasmoids and special needs children that they too could become professional footballers. However, they still had hope in the Europa League, where a massive 7-1 aggregate victory over Athletic Bilbao saw them make their way to the Europa League final, with Harry Maguire morphing into prime David Beckham in the first leg before Mount pulled out the performance of his life in the home leg. And then in the Premier League, after a run of 8 games without a win, they faced Aston Villa at home in their final game of the season, where Emi Martinez had a moment of madness and got sent off. I can't lie, we all know Højlund would have missed anyway, he didn't have to do that. Later on, Aston Villa were then robbed of a perfectly fine goal, before Ahmad made it 1-0 Man United a couple minutes later. And then in his final Premier League game, Christian Eriksen scored a penalty to make it 2. Manchester United won just their 5th Premier League game of 2025, taking them up to 15th in the league. And with just 42 points, 18 defeats and a -10 goal difference, it was by far United's worst ever Premier League season, and their worst league campaign since they got relegated in 1974. But United had basically given up in the league and placed all their focus on the Europa League, where they had made it to the final, and now they had an opportunity to save their season as they faced Tottenham in the final. And as we all know, Tottenham don't win trophies, so there was absolutely no chance they could beat the mighty Manchester United in a final. Except they actually did, as Ruben Amorim's Manchester United produced the most pathetic final performance of all time in what was maybe the worst European final in history. How this preposterous donkey and goal Onana managed to achieve a career in football, I will never know. And don't get me started on Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire. In fact, every single United player was pathetic in that final, and losing a European final to Tottenham Flippin' Hotspur was just the cherry on top of a generationally nefarious season. This is the moment that this club deserved to get liquidated. 15th in the league and losing a final to Tottenham, but somehow they lasted, making it to another season.
Today, after this disaster season, I want to tell you the good days are coming.
So that takes us up to this season. Manchester United had achieved new lows in the previous year, so literally anything would have been an improvement on that calamity. And with no European football, the entire focus was on the domestic season. And they actually had a pretty inspiring transfer window. They got rid of the likes of Rasmus Højlund, Anthony, Garnacho and Jadon Sancho, whilst bringing in talent such as Matheus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo, who managed a combined 35 goals and 14 assists in the Premier League last season, and lack of talent such as Benjamin Sesko. And they began the season at home to Arsenal, where they shocked everyone and actually won. Well, at least that's what you'd think if you watch football via Twitter, because to this very day United fans still act as if they won this game, when in reality they lost 1-0 to a first half Calafiori header and created very little in the rest of the game, and once more they were down in 15th. In their second game they went away to Fulham, where they won a first half penalty, which was blazed over into orbit by Bruno Fernandes, who then tried to blame the referee for bumping into him before he took the penalty. Look at this bozo. In the second half they took the lead through an own goal from a corner, but Fulham would eventually equalise through Emil Smith-Rowe, as United dropped points yet again, and then went away to League 2 side Grimsby in the Carabao Cup second round. It was supposed to be a simple first win of the season for Manchester United, but instead Onana let a shot go straight through him early on, before this certified bozo completely missed the ball for a second goal for Grimsby. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, United were genuinely 2-0 down to flipping Grimsby, and Amrin was seen looking absolutely clueless on the bench. And Mbeumo went on to get his first goal for the club to make it 2-1, and a very late Maguire equaliser sent the game to penalties, where Andre Onana let about 5 Grimsby penalties go right through his hands. Honestly, what's the point in a goalkeeper if he's not going to save the ball? Whilst Cunha and Mbeumo both missed penalties, seeing Grimsby knock out the mighty Manchester United. Onana was never allowed anywhere near the club ever again, and how Amrin kept his job after this, I will never know. Their next game was a relegation 6-pointer at home to Burnley, where it took United scoring one of those calamitous goals of all time for them to take the lead. In the second half, Lowell Foster got on the end of a cross to get Burnley back on level terms, but almost instantly Dalot set up Mbeumo to put United back into the lead. The lead didn't last though, as United produced some more scandalous defending to allow Jadon Anthony to tap in from close range, with United needing a last-minute Amad Diallo dive to win a penalty and get one last chance to win the game. And this time Bruno managed to score, before he proceeded to celebrate like he just won his country the World Cup. Honestly, the United celebrations after this game were beyond embarrassing. Things returned back to normal as United went away to the Etihad, where Luke Shaw was left in the dust by Doku, who played a 1-2 with Ugarte before feeding Foden to score once again against United. Then in the second half, Doku played through Haaland, who dinked the keeper, as Luke Shaw was left tumbling. And then United played the world's first ever onside trap to allow Haaland the freedom of Manchester to coolly convert a second. And City ran out 3-0 winners. Some Robert Sanchez tomfoolery for Chelsea at Old Trafford gave United a man advantage, which they made the most of as Bruno crashed the box but United a goal up. And then some Manchester United style defending by Chelsea allowed Casemiro to head in a second for United. And despite going down to 10 men themselves, United held out for a 2-1 win. They reverted back to being a hopeless bunch of bozos away at Brentford, conceding twice to Igor Thiago after deciding they just didn't want to defend today. Sesko took 3 shots before he was finally able to score, getting United back into the game. And then with 15 minutes to go, United won a penalty with a chance to equalise. But Bruno the bozo wasn't able to capitalise as Kelleher saved a spot kick, before Jensen smacked one in from the edge of the box as Bayern Deer decided to dive out the way of the flipping ball. However, United's new goalkeeper Lammens was brought in to face Sunderland, and he picked up a clean sheet on his debut as United actually won again, this time 2-0, and United were now in the top 10 in time for them to travel to Anfield against an out-of-form Liverpool side, and it took them less than 2 minutes to go 1-0 up through Brian Mbeumo. Liverpool went on to miss a whole bunch of sitters in this game, but eventually were able to level the scores as Gakpo tapped in from close range. However, 5 minutes later, Bruno's cross into the box was met by the head of Harry Maguire to score a famous win for United at Anfield, their first since 2016. This was followed by a classy 4-2 win over Brighton, as United fired themselves into the top 6, but the good form didn't last as they dropped points away to relegation threat to Nottingham Forest, needing a late volley by Ahmad to salvage a draw. Some hopeless defending by Tottenham allowed Mbeumo to head United into the lead at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and United were holding on to the lead until the 84th minute when Tell swiveled in the box to hammer in an equaliser, before a shocking 91st minute winner by Richarlison, who went absolutely wild in his celebration, just for De Ligt to head in from a 95th minute corner to save United a point. United had gone 5 games unbeaten and were looking like a capable side again finally, and when Everton came to Old Trafford, their own players decided to fight each other, making the job even easier for United. But despite having an extra man, United were still unable to stop Dewsbury Hall from tiptoeing through and smashing home a wonder strike, and their lack of imagination in front of goal meant they lost 1-0 at home to a side who had a player sent off after 15 minutes for slapping his own teammate. They then dropped points at home again, this time to a diabolical West Ham team after a late equaliser by Magassa, before going away to Wolves, who spread their legs for Bruno and his teammates to ejaculate all over them, and then hosting Bournemouth at Old Trafford in a game that became an absolute classic. United were 2-1 up going into half-time, but early second half goals by Evan Nilsson and Tavernier spun the game on its head, and Bournemouth took the lead. Then sudden quick-fire goals by Bruno Fernandes and then Mateus Cunha so United retake the lead at 4-3. But the scoring wasn't finished as Krupi found space between the lines and levelled things up for Bournemouth, rounding off an incredible 4-4 scoreline. Two beautiful finishes by Morgan Rogers saw United lose again at Villa Park, causing Amram to finally switch to a 4 at the back at home to Newcastle, with Patrick Dorgu smashing home a volley to grab United the 3 points, just for Amram to switch back to a 3 at the back at home to bottom place Wolves, who ended their 11-game losing run with a draw at Old Trafford, with this bozo Dallo deciding to celebrate a goal that didn't go in instead of attempting to score, and Dorgu having a last-minute winner ruled out for offside. Some more embarrassing defending from them for a goal down to Leeds, in a game that ended in a 1-1 draw, putting Amram in the firing line.
I came here to be the manager, not to be the coach. And that is going to finish in 18 months. That was the deal. That is my job. And every department, the scouting department, the sport director needs to do their job. I will do mine for 18 months and then we move on.
And he was sacked the following morning. Well, that was a quick 18 months. It kinda says a lot about the current state of Manchester United, that this disaster of a manager wasn't sacked for his countless hideous results, but instead for challenging the boards. In his place, Darren Fletcher temporarily took charge, picking up a poor draw away to Burnley before being dumped out the FA Cup by Brighton, conceding once again to Danny Welbeck as they were out of both cups at the first hurdle. And then they decided to bring back Michael Carrick as interim until the end of the season, with United 7th in the table and the Manchester derby looming. And what came next was an entirely different Manchester United. First, Mbeumo hit City on a wonderful counter, before Dorgu wrapped up a 2-0 Derby Day win from close range. They then headed to league leaders Arsenal, who went 1-0 up through a Martinez own goal, but this bozo Zubimendi played it straight to Mbeumo, who equalised, before Dorgu walloped in an absolute thunderbolt in the second half to shock the hosts. Arsenal pulled back a scrappy equaliser in the dying minutes, but Cunha whipped in another dagger to secure a shock win for United, before going 2 goals up at home to Fulham in the next game. However, they let it slip, first to a penalty and then a rocket by Kevin in stoppage time. But Carrick's revitalised Manchester United did not lie down, as Sesko expertly finished an even later winner. And then Mbeumo got on the score sheet again from a set piece against Tottenham in a win sealed by a late Bruno Fernandes goal. It was a result that made it 4 wins in a row, and it was looking at that one fan would finally be able to cut his hair, as the whole footballing world came together to watch Manchester United head away to relegation battling West Ham to see this one guy get a haircut, just for them to go 1-0 down to a Thomas Souček goal. They thought they got back into the game, but Casemiro's header was ruled out for offsides, and they did eventually get a last-minute equaliser, but it wasn't enough as the winning streak was over, and the United strand was left having to wait another 27 years with that absolute mop on his head.
Day 494 of not cutting my hair until Man United win 5 games in a row.
It wasn't the worst result though, as United currently sit 4th in the Premier League table, a far cry from what they were 13 years ago, but also a solid improvement on last season. And that finally completes the entire collapse of Manchester United from 2013 to 2026. This video has taken me for flipping ever, bruv. I started working on this video when they just drew at home to West Ham at the start of December when they were 8th. It's taken me over 2 flipping months. Never again am I doing a video like this, man. I know some people watch this video and be like, oh, they're doing good now, and be like, why are you making this video? Well, as we've seen in this video, they've gone on many runs like this, and they've gone on to collapse and be terrible again. So I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we know it's gonna happen again. And also, I can't lie, I've been working on this video for over 2 months. So just enjoy the video, bruv. Anyway, thanks for watching, and thank you for 50,000 subscribers. Obviously, we hit this milestone like a while ago now, but I wasn't making any videos to say anything, so thank you, innit? The videos are going to be coming back regularly now, because like I said, I'm never doing a flipping video like this again. So you can be expecting some consistency now, man. Anyway, that's it for this video. Like I said, thank you for watching. And also, follow me on Instagram and on TikTok. In a bit, G.